Hello, and thank you for choosing this full length, clean, historical Western romance by Kat Lynn. We are so happy to have you with us today. Before we begin, don't forget to tap the subscribe button and like and share with your friends. Your support allows us to continue sharing these sweet, heartwarming stories for free. Now, relax and get ready to travel back in time to the American frontier, where we join an adventure to find love and happily ever after. Enjoy. Copyright of Kat Lynn, A Partner to Love Rainbow Falls Brides Book 4, Chapter 1. Zeke sighed for the umpteenth time as he trod the rocky path to his ranch house. It was a hot day, with relentless rays casting a golden glow across the sprawling ranch. Last night had been a rainy one, but all that coolness dissipated in the haze. From the position of the sun hanging high in the clouds, he could tell it was already noon. Time for lunch. His ranch hands could handle the herd. As his house came into view, with its logged walls visible against the dust swirling around, a smile lit Zeke's face. The ranch was short of horses, and even though the house was quite far from the pastures, he had to make the long trek. Getting to the porch, he sank into a nearby bench. He took off his hat and tossed it onto the floorboard. At once, the fatigue seeped into his bones, and his legs doubly ached. He took several deep breaths and leaned back, crossing his legs. As if on cue, his belly rumbled. He groaned, already thinking of what to prepare. He'd skipped breakfast just to get a head start earlier that morning, and now he was wishing he hadn't. If only there was someone to prepare his meals. Zeke shook his head. He didn't need that luxury. It wasn't that he couldn't, he just didn't see the need to. Hiring a cook cost money, and it was a waste. Why would he pay someone to do what he could do himself? What he needed was a partner, not a maid. He sat forward, running a hand through his long, dark hair. If only it were that easy. It wasn't that he didn't try. Raised by his father since his mother died after bearing him, he knew nothing but his faith and the ranch. His father, who had passed on, never remarried. He had been a kind man who never missed an opportunity to talk about his late wife. Zeke enjoyed those stories. His favorite was his father meeting his mother when she came to the ranch for shelter during a storm. Zeke heaved a sigh. It was after taking over the ranch that he realized how much he needed a wife. He couldn't do it all alone. He'd keep looking until he found someone. Another rumbling noise and Zeke got to his feet. He had to eat something. There was still a lot of work to do. Just as he grabbed his hat, the sudden clatter of hooves and a familiar whistle broke the silence. He turned, noticing someone walk past the wooden fence and toward the house. His lips curled when he recognized the figure. Sherman? Sherman, an old friend of Zeke's, clad in a dust-coated hat, gray jacket, white shirt, and brown trousers, sauntered to the porch with a grin as wide as the waterfall outside town. His boots drummed against the wooden floor as he got closer. Zeke's eyes lit up. Sherman's surprise visit was a welcome change from the usual solitude. Zeke, you old coyote, it's been a long time since I saw you last. You haven't been in Vine Valley since I can remember. How've you been? Busy, Zeke laughed as the two men embraced each other. There's just so much to do on the ranch. What brings you to Rainbow Falls? Sherman leaned against the wall. I have some news that'll surely make your day. Well, don't leave me in suspense, he replied, gesturing to the chair across from him. Sherman sank onto the bench, taking off his hat. He beamed as he turned to Zeke, who was already leaning forward. I'm getting married soon. Zeke's mouth fell open. Everyone knew Sherman as a timid farmer who had a hard time talking to women. The news hit Zeke like a ton of bricks. He chuckled, his lips twitching. Well, I'm happy for you. Who's the lucky woman? How did you two meet? When's the wedding? Her name is Agnes. She's not from around these parts. We're getting married the next Sunday after this. %. Zeke joined Sherman on the bench, wanting to hear more. As Sherman went on about his impending marriage, Zeke's smile faltered. Thoughts ran through his mind. Sherman had found a partner. There Zeke was, still hoping, praying for someone. Something Sherman said stuck out to him, and he shook his head to blot out the thoughts. What did you mean when you said she's not from around here? Agnes is from Pittsburgh. It's a long way from here. Zeke's mouth fell open, and it took him a brief moment to find his speech. Are you telling me you went to Pittsburgh? Why? Don't tell me it was just to find a wife." Sherman shot an incredulous look at Zeke before roaring with laughter. Zeke frowned, wondering if he'd said anything out of place. "I didn't travel so far, pal," he said, wiping his eyes. "I posted an advertisement in the paper." Zeke, realizing what that meant, turned his gaze to the horizon. His brows creased, but he fought hard not to grimace. "Mail-order brides," he muttered, the words like dust that settled on his lips. "Never did trust a love that comes stamped and posted." Sherman chuckled, the sound echoing off the walls. "Might be, but I'll take it. You could too." "And why do you think so?" Zeke's gaze returned to his friend. "Why, you haven't even seen a lady from town, let alone courted one." Zeke's thoughts wandered to his quiet nights. The emptiness of his house, a stark reminder of what was missing. His jaws clenched. Sherman was right. "I don't know, buddy. I just don't like the idea. You're marrying someone you only know through letters. You don't know much about them or their past lives." "That's where God comes in. I prayed before writing to Agnes and my prayers were answered. Agnes is as sweet as they come. You should meet her someday." Zeke sighed, his head dropping. He was lonely, but he wasn't so sure about posting an advertisement that anybody could answer. Why? The woman could be a soiled dove looking to settle down, and he wouldn't know it if she didn't tell him. He wasn't against lost folk returning to the fold, but he didn't want just any woman to become his wife either. "My, take a look at that. I'm afraid I've spent enough time here, Zeke." Sherman slowly got to his feet. "I've got a lot to do in town before I head back home." "Can't you stay for lunch? I could whip up a quick meal." "It's all right. I've had plenty for breakfast already." Zeke stood, and the two men shook hands. "Thanks a lot for stopping by. I can't wait to be there for your wedding." "You won't have to wait long." Sherman slapped Zeke on the shoulder and smiled. "I hope you find the right woman as well. You've been long overdue." "I hope so as well," Zeke nodded, a wistful smile on his face. Grabbing his hat and chuckling, Sherman ambled away. He turned just before reaching the wooden gate and tipped his hat. Then he was gone. Zeke watched his friend disappear into a waiting wagon. Left alone, with the simmering heat still unrelenting, Zeke pondered Sherman's words. He stepped into his house, wondering if it wasn't time to think about how he would get a wife. He could always think about that later. At that moment, what he needed was a meal. With a sigh, he set about the task. "That's the last of 'em." Zeke nodded, watching his ranch hand herd the last of the cattle into the corral. He closed the wooden gate, then nodded at Zeke, who returned the gesture. "Good job as always, Randy." The tall, young ranch hand, who was just a few years younger than Zeke, grinned and tipped his hat. Zeke did the same before turning and heading back. The evening had long set in, with the stars twinkling like distant lanterns as Zeke returned to the solitude of his ranch house. The walk was long, as ever, and he was tired and hungry by the time he got back. The wooden beams groaned under his boots when he finally made it into the house. As he entered, the silence that greeted him was a heavy cloak around his shoulders. He tossed his hat onto the table and sighed deeply. Fetching a box of matches, he lit a lantern and some candles. "Another night alone," he muttered to himself, the words rolling off his tongue. It had been almost a year since he'd ridden down to a party in town in his best clothes, hat in hand, looking for a bride. He chuckled without humor, the memory returning to him. It was his first time attending a party, and it didn't end as he hoped. Luck hadn't been riding with him. With every passing social event, each return was lonelier than the last. With his chest tight, Zeke tried hard to swallow. His lips were dry. Maybe he needed some water. Moving to the kitchen, he poured some water from a jar and forced it down. Then he glanced around. He also needed food. Deciding on a quick dinner, Zeke set about the task. He fetched some potatoes and chopped them up before dumping the lot onto a pot of boiling water on the stove. Before long, his supper was ready. He moved with mechanical precision, setting the table for one. The clink of cutlery against the plate echoed a little louder than usual. Everything did. It was just him, after all. A squeak and a scurry in a corner of the room distracted him, and he squinted his eyes to get a better view. A rat. It bolted out of sight through a chip in the log wall. Zeke shrugged. Usually he would hunt down the creature, but he didn't feel like it that evening. If anything, the rodent was company. Opening a cupboard, he cut out a little piece of cheese. He placed it by the hole and went back to setting his table. As he sat down to his solitary meal, the thoughts that had been simmering in his mind began to boil over. Maybe it's time, he conceded, the words barely above a whisper. Time to cast a wider net and find someone who's looking for the same things I am. Dinner passed with him in deep thought, and with each bite, he came a step closer to a decision he never thought he'd make. A mail-order bride. The words echoed clearly in his mind. Was it so bad after all? Supper was done. With the plates cleared and his resolve set, Zeke moved to his little study, where he pulled out a pen and paper. Taking a deep breath, he put his pen to ink. His hand paused just as he was about to begin, as if his fingers too were unsure of this new path. But as the night wore on, the words began to take shape. He decided on something short. Wanted. A wife needed on a ranch. Would love a woman with a strong spirit and a kind heart who is willing to build and care for a family. Inquire within. He added his name and address, then reread the words over and over, rewriting until he was satisfied. With a final nod to himself, he folded the paper and exhaled. Tomorrow, he would take it to the local paper. From there, it would begin its journey. Perhaps so would he. Chapter 2. Tiffany's fingers danced between the yarn and needles as she knitted on, her eyes fixed on her hands. Juliet, sitting across the living room on a sofa decorated with flower patterns, was doing the same. Tiffany looked up to find her best friend watching her, her velvety blue eyes carrying an amused stare and a wide smile on her lips. "What's the matter?" She stopped. "Do I have something on my face?" Juliet shook her head, her eyes sparkling. "Oh, nothing. I was just admiring how easily you're knitting those scarves. I just like doing it, you know. It calms me." Juliet stopped, dropped her needles and threads, and crossed the room to where Tiffany was. She placed a hand on Tiffany's shoulder. "You and I know how much you love knitting, but you're only this focused when you're thinking about something. What's on your mind now?" Tiffany sighed as she continued knitting. Juliet knew her well. In all honesty, she had been deep in thought. Things hadn't been the same since the death of her husband Benjamin, and she couldn't help but wish she had discovered he had been ill sooner. She would have done something. Anything. Tears fell from her misty eyes. "I can't stop thinking about him." "Ben?" Tiffany sniffed, wiping her eyes. "Yes?" "Your husband was one of the nicest men in town. Everyone loved him. We all miss him. I know how much you loved him, but he would want you to move on. Don't you think so?" "How am I supposed to do that? Ben was everything." Tiffany pulled at the edges of her dress, the yarn and needles falling onto her dress. "I can't move on when I still see his face." Tiffany's head bobbed up, and she turned to Juliet, whose gaze was gentle. She mumbled an apology, but the blonde shook her head. "You don't have to be sorry. I understand. Ben meant a lot to you. I've known you since you first arrived in Madison, and I've known Ben for longer. You both loved each other. Cherish the memories, but don't let that stop you from finding happiness again. If you feel not marrying again is what will give you that happiness, then that's fine with me." Juliet giggled. "Though I wonder how you'll manage with all the suitors dropping in like moths to the flame." Juliet's giggle became a hearty laugh. Even though she was beside herself with sadness, Tiffany joined in. She'd been receiving a lot of suitors lately, but her mind was made up. She wasn't remarrying. Their laughter was still in the air when a knock on the door distracted them. Tiffany's eyebrows creased, and her laughter slowly faded. Augusta had gone to town to get food, but she barely knocked whenever she returned. Usually the door just swung open, and she came in with gossip on her lips. When Ben was still alive, he usually reprimanded his mother for the gossip. Augusta never listened. So who was it? "Come on in. The door isn't locked." The door opened, revealing Lester, an Irish mason from town. Trim in a neat black suit, Tiffany could have sworn she'd never seen him in, even on Sundays, and a shining black hat that complemented his clothes. He looked nothing like the Lester she knew. Her eyes studied his broad frame, filling the doorway. The only oddity in his outfit was his worn, mud-caked boots. He probably couldn't get better ones for his visit. Tiffany sighed. She could guess why Lester was here. He didn't have to go through such great lengths just to court her. He took his hat off, wiping numerous beads of sweat off his forehead with a large, weathered hand. Some slipped onto his rough beard. He could have gotten a shave, at least. "Good afternoon, Miss Barker." "Oh?" He turned to Juliet. "I'm afraid I didn't see you there, Mrs." Juliet nodded, swaying her hands. "Don't mind me." Lester's throat bobbed up and down as his eyes returned to Tiffany. He cleared his throat and ran his fingers through his thick red hair. "I've come to," he swallowed again, "ask you for a walk across town." Tiffany couldn't believe her ears. A walk? Lester came in his finest clothes, if they were his, just to invite her to walk? "I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't understand." "It ain't much, ma'am. We could stroll to the park and talk like you do with your friend here. I'll bring you back before sunset." From the corner of her eye, Tiffany noticed Juliet's lips twitching. She placed a finger over them, coughing. Tiffany could have rolled her eyes. The cough was too exaggerated. Facing her suitor, she shook her head. "I'm sorry, Lester. I'm afraid I might have to decline. My mother-in-law won't be back for a while, and my baby will wake up any time soon. I'd have loved to bring him along, but Dr. Mark said the cold evening air isn't good for him. You won't want my son getting sick now, would you?" "Oh, no." He shook his head, stepping back. "That's the last thing anyone would want. Well, I'm sorry for bothering you. I'll be back some other time. You have a good day now." "Thank you, sir." Inside, Tiffany wished she'd cut him off more firmly. Frankly, the incessant calls by men from town were getting on her nerves. She turned to her knitting as the door closed, her resolve as tight as her stitches. Juliet's laughter bubbled over, a sound as light as the afternoon breeze. "Oh, Tiff, you do have all the luck. Suitors at your doorstep, yet you turn them away like stray cats." Tiffany sighed, her hands never missing a beat. "It's not luck, Jules. It's a nuisance. They don't know the first thing about courting a woman. Why, even I could do a better job than them. Besides, none of them can hold a candle to Ben." Her voice softened at the mention of her late husband, and her hands slowed as the love that lingered in her heart weaved its way out through her words. "I suppose I should count myself fortunate then," Juliet said, still giggling. "My uncle's wealth and strictness may keep the suitors at bay, but it also keeps me from such headache. I can't imagine how I'll handle so many suitors." They fell into a comfortable silence. It was a peace that could have stretched for a long time, but it was not to be. The door creaked open once more, and a suited man stepped inside, his posture rigid. The short man was more neatly dressed than Lester. At least he had better shoes. Was it another suitor? Tiffany frowned, already about to tell the man off for bad manners, before she recognized him as someone from Juliet's uncle. He nodded at the thin woman. "Miss Juliet, your uncle requests your presence immediately. There's a carriage outside waiting for you." Juliet's eyes met Tiffany's. With a resigned nod, she rose, her yarn and needles forgotten on the couch. "I guess this is bye for now. You know how my uncle gets," she murmured, her voice lower than before. "Goodbye, Tiffany." "Bye, Jules. Thanks for stopping by." As the door closed behind her friend, Tiffany was left alone with her thoughts and her knitting. The room felt emptier, and the silence was louder. She gazed out the window. A light breeze blew the flowers in the garden to and fro, their bright colors visible in the sunlight. With a deep breath, she set aside her knitting. She missed Ben. Her heart ached, and tears stung her eyes once more. "I couldn't get much from the store today. I had to go to the bank as well, but it won't be long before Ben's savings are gone, and we don't have any means of income. What do you think we should do?" Shrank. The living room was steeped in the soft hues of twilight, shadows stretching across the floor as the day surrendered to the evening. Tiffany sat in a high-backed rocking chair that creaked as she moved, humming a gentle lullaby for her infant son, Petey, who lay cradled in her arms. Across from her, Augusta, Ben's mother, occupied the floral-patterned sofa, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Tiffany didn't have an answer to Augusta's question. She'd been wondering the same thing herself. She glanced around, her gaze shifting to the mantelpiece. It held an array of photographs, the smiles captured in black and white stark against the dark wood. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow that battled the creeping chill of the night. "Truthfully, I don't know." They sat in silence for a few more moments, with Tiffany's humming and the crackle of flames the only sounds in the room. You should consider remarrying, dear. Augusta's voice broke the silence, her tone gentle yet insistent. Ben would have wanted you to be happy and to have someone to help raise Petey. Tiffany's gaze remained fixed on the slumbering child, her fingers tracing the soft curve of his cheek. They'd discussed this so many times before. Augusta was a kind old woman who saw Tiffany as her daughter instead of her son's wife, and she'd pushed for Tiffany to remarry after Ben's death. But Tiffany still grieved for her husband, and she couldn't bring herself to remarry. "I can't, Augusta," she whispered, the words heavy. "I'd rather face the struggle than replace Ben in my heart." The gray-haired woman sighed, the sound long and heavy. "It's not about replacing him, Tiffany. It's about finding a companion. You need someone to share your life with." Tiffany fixed her gaze on August, her resolve unyielding. "I'm content with how I am. I'll manage, as I always have." "How?" "I don't know." She beamed at the old woman. "We'll be fine, Augusta. I know we will." With a resigned nod, Augusta rose. "You should take Petey inside and get some rest yourself. I'll be going to sleep now, dear. This old woman needs all the rest she can get." Tiffany's smile widened. "Good night, Augusta." Her face wrinkled when she returned Tiffany's smile. The doorway framed her silhouette as she departed, leaving Tiffany alone with her thoughts and the sleeping baby. As the fire dimmed to embers and the night deepened, Tiffany gave in to the tears that had threatened to pour. They came as a stream, silent and relentless, and she cradled Petey closer. Her heart ached for the man who had been her everything. Ben's presence was everywhere, like an invisible caress against her soul. She remembered his warmth, his strength, and the way he could make the world right with just a smile. She would never have anyone like him again. Chapter 3. Zeke stepped out of the large wooden structure, shielding his eyes against the midday sun. Behind him, a rabble of voices grew louder as people made their way out of the church. Amongst them were families, with parents calling to their excited kids to hurry up for the Sunday meal, and couples holding each other's hands or leaning against each other. He wore his hat and strode away. Another week had begun. Zeke absent-mindedly kicked some gravel off the road as he strolled down the dusty main street. It would be another week alone. The sun beat down mercilessly, casting long shadows over the wooden buildings that lined the road. He tipped his hat at a few folks he passed, exchanging some nods. His weekly routine had become tiring. He wished again that he would find someone to help. Stopping, Zeke turned in another direction. He hadn't seen Al Grayson in church. The sheriff wouldn't mind a visit. Zeke strode down a corner until he stopped at a small house that looked identical to all the others. The only defining feature was a boar hide hanging above the door. Grayson was a prolific hunter who loved the sport. Straightening his spine, he adjusted his clothing. Zeke went up to the door and knocked twice. There was no main purpose for the visit, but small talk about the weather and the latest gossip in town with his closest friend wouldn't hurt. He could also use some water. "Who's there?" "It's me, Sheriff," Zeke said with a grin. "Zeke?" A chuckle rang from within. "Come on in, you son of a gun!" Zeke pushed open the door and stepped into the dimly lit interior, his eyes taking a while to adjust to his surroundings. There was Grayson, dropping some papers as he got to his feet. "Afternoon, Sheriff," Zeke greeted, removing his hat and running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. Grayson crossed his hands. "Really? Sheriff? We've known each other longer than that. You used to call me Big Brother once, you know." Zeke laughed, remembering their childhood. Grayson's family had once lived near the ranch, and Grayson and Zeke had played as kids, even though Grayson was a few years older. Grayson joined the military as a teenager and came back years later as a grown man with a wife. It wasn't long before he took up the mantle of sheriff from the last sheriff, who had advanced in years by then. After a lot had happened, they were still close friends. "It's good to see you haven't lost your sense of humor, Al, even with your reputation for being tough. Gotta be hard-faced if I want order in this town." With their laughter ringing out across the room, Grayson and Zeke shook hands. They sat, and Zeke leaned back as his tense muscles relaxed. "So, what brings you by today?" "I thought I'd check in," Zeke said, grinning, before pointing at the papers Grayson was holding. What are those? These? Grayson grabbed the stack of papers. Reports, outlaws and bounties, petty thefts, drunken brawls, disputes over property lines, and the like. I was studying one in particular. Which? Grayson's smile faded. Craig Merle. Zeke frowned. Merle was a known figure in those parts, infamous for being a drunk and a troublemaker. No ranch was spared from his trouble. Even with Zeke, he'd caused trouble on more than one occasion over the grazing of their herds. Craig had been encroaching on land that was Zeke's. Didn't you arrest him? I heard he was responsible for the fire on the Sorensen ranch. He was. He tried to do it again when it was clear the last fire didn't cause any lasting damage. Almost killed Dennis Sorensen. He's in custody now. Zeke wasn't close to Dennis. The other rancher was on the opposite side of town, but they were acquaintances. What happened to Dennis? I just realized I didn't see him in church. Is he all right? He pulled through. He's probably just taking it easy with his wife. Zeke heaved a sigh of relief. I heard of her. Faith, right? The new nurse at the clinic? One of my men fell from his horse the other day and broke an ankle. She patched him up quite nicely and spoke kind words. That's her, all right. Dennis is a lucky man, Zeke said, wishing deep inside that he had someone to call his own as well. He is, and here you are, with your distrust for mail-order brides. Zeke's head jerked up. She's a mail-order bride? In a way, Grayson chuckled. Still think it's a bad idea? Not really. Zeke shook his head, then decided to change the topic. What'll happen to Craig? That's for a jury to decide, but I reckon he'll be spending a long time behind bars. Their discussion shifted to more town affairs, and before long, Zeke remembered why he had come. Any chance a man can get a cup of water? Grayson nodded, chuckling. Pardon me, I forgot about that. I'll be back. With that, he disappeared into an adjoining door. Zeke glanced around and noticed a frame on an oak mantel. He walked over to it and picked it up. It was a faded photograph of Grayson and Elaine. Grayson was in a U.S. Army uniform with double shoulder knots and a bar, the insignia of a lieutenant, while Elaine was in a plain dress. We took that while I was stationed in Boston. That was where we met. Zeke jumped and turned. Grayson stood by the doorway, holding 2 cups, with a distant gaze in his eyes and his lips curled in a smile. You must miss her a lot. Grayson dropped the cups on a table nearby and sauntered to Zeke. He held the frame, his hand tracing the glass. Every day, Zeke, Grayson confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. It's like a piece of me died with her. Zeke laid a hand on Grayson's shoulder. He understood the pain of losing a loved one, even if he didn't speak of it often. Elaine had died in childbirth and the baby was still born. Grayson was never the same after that. Grayson placed the frame back on the mantel and sighed, the skin of his jaw tightening. Clearing his throat, Zeke decided to lighten the mood by telling Grayson what he tried to avoid talking about. I've been putting out adverts for a new wife. Grayson chuckled, the lines around his eyes crinkling with amusement. You? I know. It doesn't sound so right, but I've finally been convinced to go for it. A man's got to try his luck, Zeke. Grayson chuckled, slapping Zeke's back. I hope you find a good woman soon. I'm tired of visiting your empty house. They shared a laugh, the tension in the room easing as they bantered back and forth. But beneath the jovial facade, Zeke couldn't shake the nagging feeling of loneliness that lingered in his heart, a feeling he knew all too well. Zeke studied his new horse, running his hand through its muscular neck. It was a good buy. The huge brown stallion went for a bargain price of $10, and Zeke couldn't have it better. As he waited for the salesman to count the coins, he studied the horse. It was perfect. Grayson had informed Zeke about the sale earlier. A bargain sale for horses wasn't something common in these parts, and every chance to get a horse for less was golden. He didn't mind breaking the bank. His ranch needed more horses. He glanced around. There were more horses around the open corral, and he could spot some fine ones. His gaze shifted to his new horse. This beautiful creature was enough for him. For now. Complete. The lanky salesman clapped, his thin lips curling. Enjoy your horse, sir. Zeke nodded, a smile plastered on his face. Thank you very much. Saddling the horse, he got on and flicked the reins. With a neigh, the beast went into a canter. Before long, Zeke was on the streets of town. He couldn't stop smiling. Another horse in his stables was welcome. In the past month alone, he'd purchased two others. A thought occurred to Zeke. A month had passed since he posted his advertisement. A month, and there was still no reply. His smile faded. Could it also be that even having a mail-order bride wasn't his fate? As he rode back from town, he decided to make a quick detour to the post office. It was a routine he had adopted, though he never expected to find anything waiting for him in the mailbox. The small office with a signboard creaking in the wind soon came into view. Once he had reached, Zeke secured his horse to a tree nearby. Pushing open the creaky door of the post office, he stepped inside. The familiar scent of parchment and ink greeted him as he glanced around. He nodded to the clerk behind the counter, who seemed half asleep, before making his way to his designated box. Zeke's brows pulled together as his fingers grazed the paper. There was a single envelope, its edges only slightly crumpled as if it had been handled with care. Zeke's heart skipped a beat as he reached for it, fingers trembling. His gaze narrowing, Zeke tore open the envelope and unfolded the neatly written letter inside. His eyes scanned the words, each line sending a jolt through him. It was a reply to his mail-order bride advertisement. A flicker of hope urged him to read on. As he devoured the contents of the letter, warmth spread through Zeke. His lips slowly pulled upward. Despite the odds, someone had taken a chance on him, even when he was already giving up hope. His heart throbbed as he reread the letter. He took deep breaths, trying to relax. Closing his eyes, Zeke made a decision. He would reply to the letter, not out of desperation or expectation, but out of a faint possibility. Who knew what the future held? And perhaps, just perhaps, he had just found the woman he would spend the rest of his life with. Chapter 4. Tiffany glanced at the tall man crossing the street. Their eyes met. He'd seen her. Sighing inwardly, she flashed him a smile. As she had predicted, he walked over to her, cap in hand. "Evenin', miss." "Mrs. Barker." Her correction was straight and without any hesitation. "How do you do?" The man, whom she recognized as Curtis, the foreman of a ranch on the town's outskirts, grinned and shrugged. "It was just like any other day, ma'am." Curtis's grin faded. "Earlier today, I heard that the Smiths are having a dance. I just wanted to ask if you'd like to come along with me. We could have a good time." Tiffany rolled her eyes. She was growing tired of the incessant calls. "I'm afraid I'll have to refuse. I have a son to take care of at home, and I've been away all day." "That's so? Where have you been?" "Working," was the reply she gave. "Well, if you need my help with anything, I'm quite all right, Curtis. Thank you for asking. Have a good evening." Not bothering to wait for a reply, Tiffany trod on. She was exhausted, inside and out. Her weary steps echoed through the streets of Madison as she made her way home from Wally's, the dressmaking business that had become her second home. She had no choice but to work. As a widow, she'd become the sole provider for her young son and her mother-in-law. Trying to distract herself from her thoughts, she glanced around. Madison was a growing town, brimming with people treading and carriages rolling through the streets. More buildings were springing up where there had been few. The buildings all had something in common. They were constructed in brick, lining the streets with their picturesque facades. According to Juliet, there had been a fire in '69 that razed a lot of buildings. Tiffany grimaced. In '69, she was still a little girl, living on her father's ranch. Her mother was still alive. An image flashed across her mind, a little girl huddled in a corner, watching on as her father's fury erupted into yells and hits. Another, of a little girl watching her father disappear into the horizon on his horse, wondering when he'd return, flashed in her mind, followed by another. "Watch it, woman." Tiffany jerked back, her eyes widening. She'd missed the incoming carriage just as she was about to cross the road. It was a fancier one than usual, drawn by two white horses and decorated with ribbons. The man who called to her sat at the reins, with two other passengers in the carriage. She caught a glimpse of the man and woman who were dressed in their best Sunday clothes, with the woman in a flowing gray dress with a lace bodice, and the man in a charcoal-hue suit and matching hem trousers. She guessed who they were immediately, a couple hitching a ride across town, either on their way to be married or after the ceremony. At once, the image of Ben flashed through her mind. Lost in thought, Tiffany's gaze lingered on the passing carriage. It had only been 5 years since she and Ben married, yet it felt like a lifetime ago. "Mrs. Barker? It is you!" A high-pitched male voice calling to Tiffany broke her reverie. Her brows furrowed. "Another suitor?" She turned, ready to tell whoever it was off, but stopped, lips open and a finger poised. Joseph, an acquaintance from the post office, was beckoning to her, grinning as he did so. Joseph was a kind man with a small frame and a gentle demeanor who had worked alongside Ben at the Madison Herald, the local newspaper Ben had owned and poured his heart into. Although he was a postman, he was still a family friend. "Joseph." Tiffany managed a weary smile. "How are you?" "I've been well, thank you. I haven't seen you in so long. And your family? I've missed coming over for dinner." "We've been okay, but it's been challenging without Ben," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Joseph nodded solemnly. "We all miss him dearly. He left an indelible mark on this community. Not a day goes by that I don't remember the best employer I've had." Tiffany didn't want to dwell on it any further. She'd had enough of it. Curiosity piqued. Tiffany decided to change the topic. "Why did you call me, Joseph?" He motioned towards the post office, his eyes gleaming. "There's a letter for you. I thought you should have it right away. It just arrived today." "A letter? But I haven't written to anyone in so long," she said, puzzled, wondering who it might be. "Perhaps it's from someone reaching out. You can't tell until you see for yourself." Tiffany nodded, although she couldn't stop searching her mind. She had no family outside Madison, so why? She stopped walking, a chill running through her. The post office, a sturdy structure of red brick, stood just before her, with Joseph already entering. She did have one family left, her father. Did something happen to him? Was he the one who wrote to her? It couldn't be. They hadn't spoken since she left his ranch for a new life in Georgia. There was no reason for him to write a letter to her out of the blues. "Are you all right, Mrs. Barker?" Tiffany looked up to find Joseph staring curiously at her. She nodded, smiling as she strode up to him. The door to the post office creaked open and she stepped inside, a pervading silence meeting her. Her gaze moved around. The interior was modest, with walls lined with wooden pigeonhole shelves, each slot meticulously labeled with the names of towns and residents. The old wooden counter, worn smooth over the years, separated the public space from the operational area, where the stamping of envelopes and the scratching of pens cut through the silence. In a corner of the room, there was the occasional clatter of a telegraph machine. "Please have a seat, ma'am. I'll be back with your letter soon." Joseph disappeared into the back, leaving Tiffany to take a moment's rest on an old wooden bench that had seen better days. It creaked and groaned under her weight, but held out. As she waited, Tiffany's eyes roamed over the room, taking in the large, detailed map that hung prominently on one wall and the small framed portraits that adorned another. Well, she wasn't really paying attention to them. Curiosity and a looming dread dominated her thoughts, and as her legs tapped the floor, she wondered once more who'd written to her. She didn't have to wonder for long. Joseph returned, holding a single envelope. "Here you are, ma'am," he said, handing it to her. The letter's edges were slightly worn, as if it had traveled a great distance. It bore a strange postmark, and she took a closer look. Rainbow Falls. Where was that? Tiffany's brow furrowed in confusion. Who could be writing to her from such a place? Another look at the address, and there was a name. Zeke S. This was getting stranger by the minute. She murmured her thanks to Joseph, who offered her a sympathetic nod. "Take care, ma'am," he said. "Let me know if there's any way I can help. We're all here for you." With the letter clutched in her hand, Tiffany mumbled her thanks and stepped back out into the fading sunlight. Her pace quickened as she made her way home. The temptation to break the envelope's seal was strong, but she resisted. Not yet. Whatever news it contained, it could wait, at least until she was in the privacy of her own home. Minutes later, Tiffany was at the door of her modest home. She opened the door, and the sight of Augusta feeding little Petey met her. She smiled, her heart warming. The scene calmed her, offering a brief respite from the day's toil, and for a brief while, she forgot all about the letter. Augusta's gaze moved to her, with the older woman's eyes wrinkling as she beamed. "Welcome back, dear. How did things go?" Tiffany sauntered to a chair nearby. Seated, she took a deep breath as her muscles relaxed. "Another long day as usual. So much work for so little. That's why I insist you remarry, my dear. It'll be easy on us. Your husband will give you a better life, like my dear son did. I know you love him, but you need to move on. We can't survive this way." Tiffany blinked, wishing it all away. "We'll weather this storm." Augusta released a deep sigh and quietly laid the infant, who was already falling asleep on the other side of the settee she was on, then faced Tiffany. She raised a brow, pointing at the letter in Tiffany's hands. "What's that, dear?" "Oh, this." Tiffany held the letter up. "Joseph, Ben's old friend who works at the post office, gave me this letter. It's from a Zeke in Rainbow Falls." Augusta's eyes lit up and her lips curled into a wide grin. Tiffany's eyes narrowed. "Is the letter for you?" "Why, no, it's for you, dear." Her chest tightening, Tiffany's head flinched back. "I don't understand. Weeks ago, I replied to a matrimonial advertisement on your behalf. The owner of the advertisement is this Zeke you mentioned." Her brows knitted together as she processed the news. It all became clear. Augusta's confession, that she had responded to a matrimonial advertisement on Tiffany's behalf, made Tiffany's body quiver. The confusion swiftly morphed into annoyance, with her hands trembling slightly as she held the letter. With a swift, jerky motion, she tore the envelope open, her heart pounding in her ears. She only needed a glance. The words ranch and bride leaped out at her, igniting a firestorm inside her. Her father's image loomed in her mind, and she made a great effort to thrust it out. "Why would you do this?" Tiffany struggled not to raise her voice so as not to wake her son. Augusta stopped smiling. "You need it, dear. We need it." "I want nothing to do with any man, especially not a rancher," Tiffany said, her voice rising in pitch as her frustration mounted. "Don't do this, dear. Don't be hard-headed. I only did what was right for us." Tiffany's hands clenched into fists at her sides, the ruffled letter crumpling further in her grasp. "This," she said, indicating the letter, "isn't the best for us." Augusta's voice, weary yet firm, cut through Tiffany's doubts. "Times have been hard, Tiffany. We've barely scraped by with Juliet's generosity and the little you make at Wally's. We need to think of Petey." Even with her mind clouded, Tiffany couldn't deny that. She glanced at her sleeping son. She needed to give him a future. But a rancher? Unable to take it, she stood. Her footsteps were heavy as she retreated to her room. There, surrounded by the quiet, she threw the paper on the floor. She kneeled by the bed and broke into tears. She let her heart out, the sobs racking her body. None of this would be happening if Ben were still alive. The minutes passed. Tiffany's cries had subsided, and she allowed herself to consider Augusta's words. The weight of their situation settled on her shoulders, and it was heavier than she could bear. She needed someone. With a sigh, she smoothed out the crinkled letter, her eyes tracing over the elegant script once more. Whoever Zeke was, he had beautiful handwriting, if it was his. The words were polite, albeit direct. It was simple. This rancher promised support and a simple domestic life. Zeke, whoever he was ready to provide, and only needed a partner who could keep his home in order. Biting her lip, Tiffany admitted this was what her family needed. The internal battle raged within her. She had a son to feed and a mother-in-law to care for. She needed a future. The letter, with its straightforward proposition, represented a lifeline she hadn't expected to find. It wasn't one she hadn't realized she needed. It was also hard to take. Lifting herself, Tiffany scrambled around for paper and a pen. Ben always had some in hand. When she found what she was looking for, she moved to a table nearby. An oil lamp burned low, and the rest of the room was shrouded in a deep shadow. Tiffany moved from the gloomy shadow into the flickering light. She had to. Georgia was already a distant memory. Tiffany sat by the window of the train, her gaze fixed on the passing landscape. The rhythmic clacking of the wheels against the tracks drowned out everything else, punctuated by the occasional whistle of the locomotive. Outside, the vast expanse unfolded before her, with rolling plains stretching as far as the eye could see, dotted with occasional clusters of trees and rocky outcrops. As the train chugged along, Tiffany placed a hand over her chest. Her breath came out in sharp bursts, and she took several deep breaths to calm herself. A sense of anticipation, tinged with apprehension, took over her mind. She was on her way to Rainbow Falls to meet the man whose mail-order advertisement her mother-in-law had answered on her behalf. It had been months since the correspondence had begun, and now, finally, she was on her way to meet him in person. She had come a long way since Ben's death. The prospect of starting a new life on a ranch made Tiffany's breath shudder. She couldn't shake the nagging doubt about what awaited her with this new husband. Her early memories of ranchers weren't so pleasant. Tiffany's thoughts drifted back to her father, a stern and rough man who had ruled their ranch with an iron fist. Why did he even bother having a family? He cared more about his cattle and land than he ever did about his family, and Tiffany had grown up witnessing the toll his cruelty had taken on her mother and siblings. Her eyes moved to the infant in her arms, who was fast asleep despite the ruckus around them. She couldn't bear to have him go through the same childhood she went through. Never again. Determined not to repeat her mother's mistake, Tiffany made up her mind then and there. If her new husband showed even a hint of the same callousness her father had possessed, she would not hesitate to leave, no matter the consequences. "Is everything all right, dear?" Augusta asked, breaking Tiffany's reverie. "You seem lost." Tiffany forced a smile and nodded. "Yes, everything's fine." The words were shallow even to her, but she hoped they kept her inner turmoil hidden beneath a facade of composure. The journey ahead would be far from easy, but it didn't matter. "Mama will be strong for you," she whispered to Petey, her low voice drowned out by another loud whistle. Chapter 5. The train would be arriving at any moment. Zeke stood alone on the platform, the sun casting long shadows across the wooden planks beneath his feet. The train station was a simple affair, a single-story building with peeling paint and a roof that had seen better days. It needed a renovation. He wasn't bothered anyway. Zeke was preoccupied with glancing at his pocket watch. His gaze moved to the sunny horizon. It was a view he knew well. He smiled. When the day started, he woke alone. He would quite possibly be going back to bed that evening as a married man. Lost for means to pass the time, Zeke fetched a faded photograph from his pocket. The gray piece was worn at the edges, and the image faded over time. He'd studied it many times already, yet there was an appeal to it that attracted his eyes. To anyone, it would be an ordinary photo. It was one of Tiffany, a young woman in a plain dress, standing with a man dressed in a formal suit, while an old woman sat in the foreground. From the letters Tiffany wrote him, he already knew the man was Ben, her late husband, and the old woman was Augusta, her mother-in-law. Yet his eyes remained on Tiffany. Her face, obscured by the grainy quality of the photo, was striking. Even without color, her eyes held depth, and her straight gaze spoke of resilience, something Zeke found himself unexpectedly admiring. Yet to him, the best part about it was her smile. He didn't know why, but it warmed his heart. He dropped the photograph. He wanted to see her beauty in real life. It was almost impossible to believe this woman would become his bride soon. Months ago, he hadn't even thought it was possible. He had been skeptical of the whole mail-order bride business, and the idea of choosing a partner from a catalog was almost strange to him. But as he stood there, waiting for the train that carried Tiffany and her family, he could scarcely believe how events unfolded. Life had a way of upsetting expectations. A whistle blared faintly in the distance, cutting through the stillness of the afternoon. The sound of the approaching train broke Zeke's reverie. He straightened, brushing dust from his shirt and adjusting his hat. His heart beat a speedy rhythm, the reality of the moment settling upon him. This was it. The train drew ever closer until it pulled into the station, belching smoke and steam. A burst of wind followed that almost sent Zeke's hat flying. As he readjusted his clothing, his thoughts turned to Tiffany's son, whom she'd mentioned in her letters. He had never imagined himself becoming a father so soon, and it seemed daunting. It didn't matter. He could take care of them. Deep within, he mused it was maybe not just help around the ranch he needed, but the warmth of a family. He hadn't had that in so long. The train came to a stop with a hiss of steam and a screech of metal on metal. Passengers began to disembark, a stream of faces that Zeke's eyes studied. No one in the crowd looked like Tiffany or Augusta. He searched again, his heart hammering against his chest. Where was she? Why was there no sign of her? He swallowed, beads of sweat gathering on his brow. Did she even come? He shook his head. He couldn't think of that. He'd laid his hopes for the future on Tiffany, and he couldn't bear to find out she hadn't even come. His gaze moved around again, the search growing frantic. He pushed through the crowd. She wasn't in sight. Then his eyes caught a glimpse of blue. There she was in a simple dress with a child in her arms, Tiffany. She stepped down from the train with a grace that belied the weariness in her eyes, her gaze sweeping the platform until it met his. Wow. At that moment, a shift happened within Zeke. His gaze remained fixed on her, with her face coming into clearer view as she got closer. The old photograph didn't do her beauty justice. His heart seemed to stop for a moment, then resumed beating with even greater vigor. The woman who came down the train was beautiful, far surpassing the faded image in his pockets. Her sun-kissed hair cascaded in golden waves, framing a face adorned with delicate features that seemed to glow. Her eyes, the color of sapphires, sparkled with a warmth that reached into his soul. She wasn't smiling, but her face seemed as bright as the sun. Clad in a simple yet elegant blue dress, she moved with a gentle grace that captivated his every sense. Zeke remained rooted to the spot for a few moments before stepping forward to greet Tiffany and her family. As Zeke approached Tiffany, a whirlwind of thoughts raced through his mind. Everything flew through. From thoughts about the son she was bringing into his life and the responsibility that came with it to their future together and their present. There was also a flicker of doubt. He was marrying a widow. Could he fill the void left by her late husband? All he wanted was a partner to help out. Why was he thinking this way? Zeke's boots kicked up small clouds of dust as he made his way over. The steam from the locomotive's engine had barely settled when he finally reached her. Something stirred in him, but he took a deep breath and shifted his focus to the present. "Ma'am," he began, tipping his hat, "it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm Ezekiel Stratton, but others call me Zeke." Tiffany offered a nod, although Zeke could notice her guarded expression. The older woman beside her greeted him with a tired but genuine smile. "We're mighty glad to be here, Mr. Galth Stratton." It didn't look that way for Tiffany, and Zeke wondered why. Did he say or do something? There was no time to dwell on that. Zeke led them to his wagon, which had been waiting for a while, with the horse chewing on a few shrubs nearby. He helped them aboard, noticing how Tiffany seemed to shrink away from his touch when he stretched his hand. Her body language was closed off, and her eyes were distant. Was it him, or did she not want to be there? He hoped he was wrong. As the wagon rolled away from the station, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels against the dirt road filled the silence. Other than some sounds from the baby, all was quiet between them. The wheels jiggled against a low mound, causing the wagon to shake. Zeke held his breath, waiting for Petey to burst into tears. The little boy began laughing instead, and the light chuckles made Zeke smile. He cleared his throat. "I was going to say sorry about that, but it seemed the boy liked it." Augusta chuckled, but Tiffany didn't make a sound. "How was your journey? I reckon the trip from Georgia must have been a long one." Augusta was quick to reply, her voice carrying over the noise. "It was as comfortable as one could hope for, Mr. Stratton. The trains these days are a marvel, aren't they?" "Yes, ma'am, they surely are. Please call me Zeke, as I said." Zeke swallowed before attempting another question. "And how is Georgia this time of year? I've heard the peach trees make quite a sight when they're in bloom." "Oh, you should see it. That'd be one of the few sights I'll miss, Zeke dear. But it's nothing compared to how vast this place is." Again, it was Augusta who answered, gesturing to the open land around them, while Tiffany remained silent, staring at the passing landscape. Zeke nodded, appreciating her attempt to engage. "Well, I hope you'll find our little corner of the world just as welcoming. There are a few sights in this part of the country as well, like the waterfall out of town." "Is that where this town gets its name by any chance?" Zeke chuckled. "I've heard so," Augusta went on. "I'm sure your ranch is a sight too. Can you tell me more about it?" "I can't say much, ma'am. It's better if you see it for yourself. My ranch is a humble place, but it's peaceful. It's in a nice, quiet part of town with plenty of space for the herd. You know, it's quite near the waterfall. That sounds lovely, Zeke, Augusta said, her eyes crinkling with a smile. Tiffany, isn't that wonderful? Tiffany finally spoke, her voice soft but clear. Yes, it does sound nice. Thank you, Mr. Stratton. Zeke's smile widened at her words, brief as they were. It was a start. Please, there's no need to thank me. I'm just glad to have you here. I've prepared rooms for you both, and there's a crib for Petey. Augusta's smile widened. You're very kind, Zeke. We appreciate all you've done. The conversation lulled as they continued their journey, the vast expanse of Zeke's ranch coming into view. He stole glances at Tiffany, wondering about the thoughts behind her quiet demeanor. Maybe in time she would open up. We're here, the preacher's home. Zeke and Tiffany stopped in front of a cottage. The abode was a quaint, whitewashed cottage with a welcoming porch adorned with hanging ferns that swayed gently in the breeze. Zeke glanced at Tiffany. Her lips were set in a straight line, and her gaze was set forward. His smile faded slowly. She still wasn't talking to him. He opened his mouth, about to ask if she wanted to marry him, but held back. If she didn't want to marry him, she wouldn't have answered his advertisement. Was she forced? He didn't think so. Augusta was a kind soul, and Tiffany hadn't mentioned any family in her letters. There was one thing she had mentioned in detail: her husband's death. His lips clamped shut, a sigh escaping his lips. It was obvious from her letters that she loved her husband. Zeke didn't want to fill the space he'd left behind. He only wanted help. He'd made that clear, but he could understand why she wasn't even looking at him. The sooner they got this over with, the better. Wait here. I'll knock. She nodded, remaining quiet, and Zeke went up the porch to the door. His knuckles rasped on the door, and a voice with a rich baritone answered on the other end. A man with gray hair, wrinkled eyes, and a robust smile stood at the door moments later, beaming when his eyes met Zeke. Zeke returned his smile. Reverend Newton Barnes was well known around town, and he'd been another close friend of Zeke's father. Well, if it isn't little Zeke. I'm not so little now, Reverend, Zeke replied, chuckling. Indeed. God bless you, son. What brings you here? Zeke stepped aside, and the Reverend's eyes fell on Tiffany. His smile widened into a grin. Reverend, this is Tiffany Barker. We're here to wed. Wonderful. You've finally done it, my boy. Newton turned to Tiffany. God cherish you, my dear. Welcome to Rainbow Falls. Tiffany mumbled her thanks, smiling for the first time since they set out. Heat rose through Zeke's cheeks at the sight. Newton ushered them inside without much ado. The living room was cozy, filled with the scent of polished wood and the faintest hint of jasmine. A small cross hung above the mantelpiece, and a well-worn Bible lay open on a modest altar by the chairs and settees. Zeke merely glanced at the surroundings before his gaze fell on Tiffany once more. Her smile made his chest flutter. The ceremony was brief. The preacher's words were heartfelt but concise, and within moments he pronounced them husband and wife. Zeke could sense Tiffany's withdrawal throughout the ceremony. Her responses were soft, almost perfunctory, and her eyes rarely met his. Reverend Newton, however, was all grins and congratulations, his words resounding through the room. Please stay for dinner, Newton said after all was done. My wife is out now, but she won't be long. We'd love to have you both. Newton's voice was warm and inviting, and Zeke found himself considering the invitation. But he shook his head. He was mindful enough of the tension he felt from Tiffany. We appreciate the offer, but dinner is waiting at home, he said, offering a polite smile. A pity. Another time. May the good Lord bless your marriage, my children. You're welcome to visit any time. Zeke nodded. We'll be in church on Sunday. After those words, he turned to Tiffany. Her smile was still intact. She didn't seem to object to that. It was over. Zeke and Tiffany were man and bride. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, the only sounds being the creak of the wagon and the occasional call of a meadowlark. Zeke stole glances at Tiffany, her face glued to the passing scenery. Again, she kept silent. This time, Zeke couldn't let it go. Tiffany was clearly withdrawing from him. Were you all right with the ceremony? He asked, hoping to bridge the silence. She nodded, her voice a whisper. Yes, I was. The conversation stalled once more. Zeke faced the road but decided to share his thoughts. I wanted a wife to help with my home so I could focus on the ranch. he said, his tone earnest. It's not just about the work, though. We don't have to be strangers. I hope we can find some happiness together. Tiffany's response was a murmur, almost lost to the wind. Zeke's heart sank a little with every wordless moment. As the ranch came into view, his grip on the reins tightened. Would they ever find common ground, or would this sullen withdrawal become the norm? He hoped for the former, but as the wagon rolled to a stop in front of his, well, their home, it didn't look likely to happen. Zeke offered his hand to help Tiffany down, and she took it wordlessly. Her touch sent warmth through his skin, but it was brief. She withdrew almost immediately, and he could only stare as she strode toward the house. Chapter 6. Tiffany stood between aisles in the store, a basket of provisions cradled in her arms, as thoughts of Zeke invaded her mind. The face of the tall, brown-haired ranch owner, with his dark eyes and chiseled jaw bordered by a trimmed beard, never seemed to leave her thoughts. It had already been a month since they married, and she'd settled in well. Within that time, she'd come to see that Zeke was very different from her father. Zeke moved with quiet confidence, a stark contrast to the boisterous cowboys she had grown up around. Her father's raucous laughter and the clinking of whiskey bottles were absent here. Instead, there was a serene orderliness that Zeke brought to every corner of the ranch. He didn't drink or smoke, and his modesty was evident in the way he spoke and carried himself. There was no swagger, no loud declarations. Even his ranch hands were well behaved. It was a different world from the one she grew up in. The sign she'd been looking for wasn't there. Zeke was true to his word. Tiffany shook her head. It was too early to tell. She stayed with her father for years. She'd barely spent a month at his ranch. "Augusta," Tiffany called softly, turning to the older woman who was sorting through a pile of linens. "Do you ever feel out of place on Zeke's ranch?" Augusta paused, her hands stilling on the fabric. "I don't think so. I've been at home since I entered the ranch. Zeke has taken good care of us so far. Do you?" Tiffany bit her lower lip. Augusta offered her a warm smile, touching her on the shoulder. "Every new beginning is a chance to grow, Tiffany. This ranch isn't just Zeke's. It's yours now, too. And Zeke, he's a good man. You know that, don't you?" Tiffany couldn't answer. Smiling, Augusta went back to sorting through wool and fabrics. Tiffany pondered Augusta's words as she stood. She couldn't bring herself to accept Zeke so easily. "Have you gotten all you need?" Augusta's question cut through Tiffany's reverie. "Not all. I wanted to get some potatoes." "Hurry, dear. Petey might wake up any time soon. We've been gone a while now." Tiffany nodded, although her mind was still adrift with thoughts. It was the same even as she walked across the aisle, and the sudden presence of a woman with wavy blonde hair standing in front of her snapped her back to reality. She stepped back hastily, a flush coloring her cheeks. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she murmured, steadying the basket in her arms. The woman turned, and Tiffany noticed the gentle swell of pregnancy. The blonde smiled kindly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "No harm done," she said, her voice as soothing as a lullaby. "Are you okay? I'm fine. Did something happen?" A light voice rang out from behind her, and another beautiful woman with golden hair appeared. "Who is this?" "I think she's new to town," the first woman said, before turning to Tiffany. "I'm Riva, and this is Hope. Are you all right, dear? You seem a bit far away." "I'm sorry. I just moved into town, and I've been trying to settle in." "That's beautiful," Riva said, smiling. "Where are you from?" Tiffany was about to utter Texas, but she stopped. Madison was her true home, even though she'd spent only 6 years there. "Madison, Georgia." Hope cut in. "That's quite the distance. Are you also a mail-order bride?" "I am. How did you know?" Riva and Hope smiled at each other. "We're the same," Riva said. "How has it been so far?" Tiffany sighed. "It's nothing like my past marriage. Zeke is a good man, but it's not the same." "What happened?" Riva asked with a concerned look on her face. "My first husband died." Riva's hand went to her lips, and Hope drew in a deep breath. "I'm so sorry," Hope said, moving closer. "I understand how hard moving on from that is. I lost my husband as well, but don't let it stop you from opening your heart. It has been hard. I feel like I don't fit in. I have bad memories of ranchers, but Zeke has been good to me so far, and I don't know how to feel." Tiffany didn't know why she was opening up to them so easily. They were strangers, but she just felt so at ease with them. She had a feeling they'd understand her struggles. They were mail-order brides too, and they seemed kind. "We're all new at some point," Hope chimed in, her hand resting on Riva's back. "But time has a way of smoothing out the rough edges. You'll find your place here." Riva's hand found Tiffany's, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "And remember, making the best of a new life is a choice. Your husband sounds like a decent man. Give it time, and who knows? You might just find your place." Tiffany shot both women a grateful look. "Thank you so much. It was nice meeting you two, but I have to go now." Tiffany thanked the women for their kindness before turning to settle her account with the store owner. With provisions paid for, she stepped outside into the late afternoon sun, where Augusta was waiting, a knowing look in her eyes. As they approached the wagon, John, the young ranch hand who drove them to town on Zeke's wagon, stood to greet them. His manners were as polished as the brass on his belt buckle, and Tiffany found herself liking him. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat to Tiffany and Augusta. "Let me help you with those." Tiffany smiled at the young man's courtesy. As the wagon rolled away from the store, the conversation with Riva and Hope echoed in her mind. Maybe they were right after all. Maybe it was time she opened up to Zeke. It was easier said than done. "Shh! Welcome back, Tiffany. Ma'am, thank you for picking up the provisions." The evening shadows stretched long across the ranch by the time Tiffany and Augusta arrived home, and the warm glow from the kitchen windows was already cutting through the twilight. Inside, the aroma of cooking filled the air, and Zeke stood at the stove, a wooden spoon in hand, stirring a pot with a smile on his face. He nodded, acknowledging their presence. Augusta beamed. "You're making dinner? That's something. My husband never learned how to fix a single meal, and my son didn't either. Maybe you can teach Petey to be different." Zeke roared with laughter, the unexpected rumble dancing across the room and making Tiffany's skin tingle. She clutched her arms. Why did he have this effect on her? "You know, Petey woke up just after you left. It took a fair bit of rocking to get him back to sleep, but I managed." Tiffany paused, struck by Zeke's easy manner and the way he spoke of their son. It was all so different from her father, who had never shown such tenderness. His warm gaze fell on her, and warmth unfurled in her chest. "There's a letter for you," Zeke said, nodding towards the counter where an envelope lay. "Came from Texas. I picked it up for you." "From Texas?" The words sent a jolt through Tiffany. Was it? No, it couldn't be. With a nod, Tiffany excused herself and retreated to her room with the letter. With haste, she broke the seal and unfolded the paper. Her father's familiar scrawl lay sprawled across the page. The words carried one single message: "Come back home." How had he found her? The question echoed in her mind, sending her head spinning. Fury bubbled up, hot and fierce, erupting from her core. Without thinking, she tore the letter into pieces, letting them fall like leaves in autumn around her feet. She stood there, amidst the remnants of her father's plea, caught in the storm of her emotions. Why did her father suddenly want her home after so long? It didn't matter. She would never go back, and no letter, no plea could change that. Chapter 7. Zeke took a deep, calming breath. The air carried the sweet scent of hay and the distant sound of cattle. Well, these were everyday sensations for him. That moment was different, as Tiffany was right beside him. He stole another glance at her. The strands of her hair glowed as they caught the sunlight. He'd offered to show her around his ranch earlier in the day, and she'd agreed to his astonishment. He didn't know how or why, but she didn't withdraw as much anymore. The day had passed by so fast. There they were, walking in comfortable silence, the soft crunch of their boots on the grass the only sound. The corrals stood in the distance, and so did the stables. As they reached the stables, the gentle nickering of horses greeted them. "Horses are such beautiful creatures," he said, his first words in a while. "They are." Zeke turned to Tiffany with a curious tilt of his head. "Have you ever ridden before?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Tiffany's nod was slow. "I can ride." "Where did you learn?" "I grew up on a ranch," she admitted, though her smile waned as she spoke. Zeke's brows shot up. Why hadn't she said anything about this before? He wanted to ask more and understand her past, but he noticed the change in her expression and hesitated just as he was about to ask. It wasn't the time. Instead, he focused on the present. A thought struck his mind. "Would you like to try riding now?" he offered, hoping to see her smile return. As he'd hoped, her lips curled. She shrugged. "I haven't ridden in so long. I don't know if I'm still good enough." "I believe you are. Come." He held her hand, holding his breath, as he expected her to pull away. She didn't. Grinning, he led her into the stable. Inside, he selected a gentle mare for Tiffany. She saddled it expertly, straddling after with great balance. "Impressive." Tiffany bowed her head. Zeke straddled his prize stallion and rode out of the stables with Tiffany. As they rode side by side through the fields, the world opened up around them. The golden horizon seemed alive, and the sky was a canvas of orange and blue. Tiffany's form on the horse was natural, her confidence growing with each stride, and Zeke leaned forward as he watched. "You're quite good at this," he said, a smile on his face. "I learned when I was young." Tiffany's eyes sparkled, and her voice was higher than usual. "I guess I still have it. Let's test it." On a whim, Zeke pointed to a distant tree, its branches silhouetted against the sky. "I'll race you to that tree. Do you feel like it?" "I do. Let's do it then." The race was a blur of motion, with the rhythmic pounding of hooves and the rush of wind. Tiffany rode with skill and ease, her laughter ringing out as she edged past him. He tugged at the reins when it was clear she'd won by a length. Breathless, he urged his horse forward toward her. His eyes remained fixed on her as she burst into laughter, rubbing the neck of her horse. He'd never seen her this way before. "You won. You're an excellent rider." "Thank you, Zeke." Those words made the butterflies in his belly flutter. She wasn't calling him by his surname anymore. Together they returned to the stables, where they handed the horses to a ranch hand. The stars had begun glistening in the sky as they walked back to the ranch house, silence returning between them. This time, it was Tiffany who broke that silence. "I had a good day," she said, turning to face him. "You have a beautiful ranch." Zeke's heart swelled. He'd taken a step closer to bridging the gap between them, if only just a little. Their eyes met, and he decided he liked Tiffany very much. He wanted to completely bridge the gap as soon as he could. "Thank you. We should." He paused, his nose catching an aroma. "Seems supper is ready." The door swung open to reveal a table set for two, the flickering candlelight casting a warm, inviting glow over the spread. Zeke paused, taking in the sight of the somewhat lavish dinner that Augusta had prepared before them. She stood in a corner, folding an apron, with a huge grin on her face. "I've already eaten, and so has Petey. We couldn't wait for you two to come." Augusta spoke with a knowing smile, her eyes lingering on Zeke for a moment before she excused herself, leaving them alone. At once, he understood what was going on. A corner of his lips curled up, and he decided to make the best of this. "Well, I guess it's just the two of us. Shall we eat?" Tiffany nodded. As they sat down, Zeke found himself captivated by Tiffany's beauty, which somehow seemed even more pronounced in the soft candlelight. The table was adorned with dishes comprising a robust beef stew, biscuits, beef, and vegetables. The spread was delectable, and the aroma was mouth-watering, but Zeke's eyes lingered on Tiffany still, the flickering light reflected in her eyes, adding warmth to her gaze. "The stew smells wonderful," he said, hoping to ease into conversation. Tiffany looked up, a soft smile playing on her lips. "It does." Dinner progressed with small talk. They spoke of the ranch, of the day's ride, and of the nearby town. As they ate, Zeke found himself more drawn to Tiffany than ever before. Her laughter, rare but heartfelt, was a sound he was coming to cherish. And when she spoke of the day with a light in her eyes, Zeke couldn't be happier. Chapter 8. The candlelight flickered, casting a soft glow on Zeke's face as he cleared the last of the dinner plates. Tiffany watched him, the flavors from the meal still lingering against her lips. She admired the confidence in his movements and the gentle way he made her feel seen. The meal was perfect, but she didn't miss Zeke's eyes remaining on her throughout. What had gone through his mind? "Augusta went all out," Tiffany chuckled. "That was a great meal. She outdid herself. It was perfect." Having cleared all the plates, he turned to her with a warm smile. "Can I walk you to your room?" She didn't hesitate. I'd like that. Together, they headed down the hallway. When they got to her room, they stopped. Tiffany twirled a strand of her hair, searching for the words to say. It wasn't easy, with Zeke so close. Thank you for today, she finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. I had a great day too, Zeke replied, his eyes holding hers in a gaze that seemed to reach into her heart. There's no need to thank me. Their eyes held, the space between them charged as sparks flew. Zeke leaned in, his hand moving to her hair. Gently, he tucked a strand beneath her ear. She shivered when his fingers moved lower to her cheeks and then to her jawline. His breath was a warm caress against her cheek, and Tiffany's heart raced. But as the distance closed, a sudden fear gripped her. She stepped back just as their lips were about to meet, her eyes turning away. Moments passed, but Zeke remained silent. She tilted her head to look at him and caught a flicker of hurt across his face before his smile returned. Good night, Tiffany, he said, his voice a soft baritone that resonated within her. Good night. As the door closed behind her, Tiffany leaned against it, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She slid to the floor, covering her face with her hands. Why was this man, a rancher like her father, stirring feelings within her that she thought had been buried with her late husband? Zeke was different. He was nothing like her father. He respected her space, even though she was his wife, cared for her family, and treated her with kindness that comforted her. She wasn't a stranger to intimate dinners. Ben had loved them, and she remembered the nights when they laughed together while having light conversations over dinner. After his death, she thought that part of her life was over. It wasn't. Zeke's face lingered in her thoughts. Her chest fluttered as his smile, his laughter, and the way he looked at her as if she were the only person in the world came back to her. The kiss that didn't happen replayed in her memory. Why had she stopped? Tiffany searched for answers. He was a rancher. He was her husband in name only. She didn't love him. Did she? Moments ago, she'd been so close to kissing him. The mere thought sent shivers running through her nerves, her skin warming. She would have kissed him. The sound of Petey's cries broke through her reverie, pulling her back to the present. As she soothed her son, Tiffany's thoughts drifted to Zeke once more. Was she ready to let down the walls she had built around her heart? Could she open up to this man who had, in such a short time, shown her nothing but patience and understanding? Before long, Petey's cries subsided. As she cuddled her son, his breathing grew soft and even against her. She sighed. Something could grow between her and Zeke if only she allowed it. She wasn't sure if she was willing to. It was a hot day, perfect for washing. The sun beat down on the ranch, its rays warm and relentless, as Tiffany scrubbed the laundry against the washboard. Her thoughts were a tangled web, each thread leading back to Zeke. It had been a week after the dinner, yet all she could think of was his smile, his kindness, and the way he had looked at her that night. Her hands stopped. Why were the thoughts lingering? She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't hear the cry that shattered the quiet. Petey! Zeke's voice rang out, sending Tiffany's heart racing. Augusta, who was with her, turned as well. Tiffany's breath seized. Earlier that morning, Zeke had offered to watch her son. Did something happen? The thought was too dreadful. She dropped the garment she was holding and rushed towards the house, her breath shuddering. What's wrong? What happened? Her words followed her as she burst through the door. She stopped, finding a scene that would be etched in her memory forever. Petey was there, his chubby legs wobbling as he took his first tentative steps towards Zeke's outstretched arms. Come on, Petey. Just a little further, Zeke said, grinning, his gaze fixed on the infant. And then, with a giggle that bubbled up like a clear spring, Petey lurched forward into Zeke's waiting embrace. Tiffany's eyes widened, and she took a step forward. She was lost for words. Her son had just taken his first steps. Zeke lifted him high, and both man and boy laughed, a sound so pure and happy that it brought tears to Tiffany's eyes. She stood there, unnoticed, watching them, feeling something inside her shift, a wall crumbling. Good boy, I'm proud of you. Wait until your mother hears of this. In his excitement, Zeke hadn't noticed Tiffany. His back was turned to her. She watched for a few more moments as Petey giggled while Zeke held him tight. Her limbs numb with relief, Tiffany stepped back. She ambled to the backyard where the laundry lay forgotten. Augusta walked up to her. Lines formed on the older woman's forehead. "What happened, dear? Is everything okay?" Petey just took his first steps. Zeke was there, cheering him on. "Oh, thank God." Augusta released a deep breath, placing a hand on her chest. "That's beautiful to hear. Zeke treats Petey like his own, doesn't he?" "He does." A tear trickled down Tiffany's face. "Why are you crying, dear? It's a happy occasion. You should be joyful." "I am. It's just," Tiffany sighed, "I don't know what to do." Augusta smiled and shook her head. "You can start by admitting to yourself that Zeke isn't like your father. He cares for your son, even though Petey isn't his. He also cares for both of us. Why, I'm the mother of your late husband, and he treats me like I'm his mother. Don't let the past get to you, dear. Live in the present. He's a rancher. What if he changes like my father? What if he doesn't?" With those words, Augusta returned to spreading clothes on the line. Tiffany returned to her task, her hands moving mechanically as her mind raced. Zeke's love for Petey was evident, as if the boy had been his flesh and blood. It was beautiful, but would it always remain the same? As she hung the last piece of clothing on the line, the fabric snapping in the breeze, Tiffany tried hard not to view Zeke in that light. But her mother once told her that her father hadn't always been that way. He'd once been kind and caring. She couldn't let her guard down. Chapter 9. Under the shade of a towering tree, Zeke leaned against the rough bark, his eyes fixed on the dusty trail leading to the ranch. The air was cooler than usual that morning. It would probably rain later. He drew in a deep breath, his mind wandering to the moments he'd had with Tiffany recently. He didn't know how, but Tiffany had planted herself deep in his thoughts, and it was almost impossible to cast off her image. Well, he didn't want to. A grin lit up his face. It had already been a few months since she first stepped onto this ranch, and she wasn't as withdrawn anymore. Lately, he even started seeing her as his wife. Did she feel the same way? There was no way to know. His lips pursed, with doubts still clouding his mind. Despite Tiffany opening up to him recently, he couldn't shake the memory of her first weeks on his ranch, with the walls she had built around her like fences guarding a herd. They'd come a long way since then. His feelings had only grown with time. What looked like an arrangement now looked real. He only needed to tell her so. What would happen after that? His throat running dry, Zeke swallowed. Whatever happened, he couldn't bear to let their fragile connection disperse like tumbleweeds in the desert wind. It was best if he didn't think about it. With a steady breath, he steeled himself. He fished his pocket watch from his jacket, glancing at the time. He'd told Tiffany to get ready more than an hour ago. Where was she? The familiar sound of footsteps crunching against dust, then grass, drew his attention. As Zeke's gaze swept over the familiar trail, his heart leaped at the sight of Tiffany approaching. His lips fell open. Her figure cut a graceful silhouette against the backdrop of the fields in the distance. With each step she took, the warmth of her presence enveloped him, stirring a flutter within his chest. "Tiffany," Zeke said, almost to himself. Tiffany's eyes sparkled as she joined him beneath the shade of the tree, the gentle breeze tousling the strands of her golden hair. His eyes were locked on her, and her outfit stole the breath from his lungs. She looked trim in a fitted cotton dress that had a soft shade of sage green he'd gotten her a week ago. He'd wondered if she'd ever wear it. Completing the outfit were a pair of rugged leather boots and a wide-brimmed hat that shielded her delicate features from the harsh glare of the sun. "Zeke," she said in return, her smile radiant as she met his gaze. "I'm here now. I'm sorry it took a while. Petey was fussing, but Augusta took over. You said you wanted to show me something?" Zeke returned her smile, his heart swelling as he looked at her. "It's a surprise. Let's go get the horses." With a nod, Tiffany fell into step beside him as they made their way towards the stables. The scent of hay mingled with the earthy aroma of leather, filling the air as they entered. To Zeke's delight, he found their mounts saddled and waiting. Raking the hay in a corner was a ranch hand, who grinned and waved as his eyes fell on Zeke's. Zeke offered him a crisp nod, and he tipped his hat before returning to his duties. As they mounted their horses and set off along the winding trail, a sense of calm settled over Zeke. Yet at the same time, his mind echoed with thoughts. Beside him, Tiffany rode with ease, her laughter flowing with the wind. "Are you sure you can't tell me where we're going? We've been riding for minutes now." Zeke cast a sidelong glance at Tiffany. "It's a special place. It would be better if I just showed you. We're going off the path here." With a gentle nudge, Zeke steered his mount off the beaten path and into a thicket nearby. Tiffany followed without another word. The chirping of birds and the clicking of insects nearby formed a rising crescendo that cut through the silence. Before long, a faint rumble in the distance entered the fray. Zeke took a deep breath, nudging his horse a little faster. They were close. The further they ventured, the louder the rumble grew, until it was a roar drowning out every sound. Tiffany's eyes squinted and she leaned forward. Zeke chuckled. "We're here." Breaking through the last of the bushy barriers, they reached a wide cliff overlooking a majestic sight that greeted their eyes. In the distance was a thundering waterfall, cascading from an imposing height. The water rushing down danced with rays of sunlight, creating what seemed like a rainbow in the misty air. The pool below mirrored the sky, so clear and crisp that it looked out of place with the environment around it. Tiffany dismounted, fixing her widening eyes on the natural marvel before her. Zeke followed, his boots sinking slightly into the grassy earth as he joined her side. His eyes moved from the waterfall to Tiffany. She placed a hand on her chest, her glimmering eyes filled with warmth that matched the sun's rays. "It's beautiful," she breathed out, her voice barely rising above the waterfall's thunder. Zeke's gaze followed her. "I told you this good old town has some great sights." "I remember you mentioning it when I first arrived," she said, her gaze not leaving the cascade. "I didn't know it was this beautiful." "Probably the most beautiful thing in the West. It's the heart of town, the very reason our town exists." After fastening their horses to some trees nearby with enough room to graze, they found a grassy knoll nearby, which served as a perfect vantage point to take in the sight. As they sat, Zeke gathered his thoughts. It wouldn't be easy, but this was the perfect time to hold a deep conversation with Tiffany and perhaps tell her how he felt. "I wish I'd asked to see this place sooner. Augusta would love this view as well." Tiffany turned to Zeke with a sparkle in her eyes. "Can we have a family picnic here? I'd love that." Caught by surprise, Zeke could only nod. Tiffany's mention of a family brought a smile to his lips. "We can. I'll see what I can do." He hesitated for a moment. "How have you found life on my ranch so far? I've always wanted to ask." Tiffany's silence stretched and the smile on her face faded slightly. The tension thickened with each passing second. Zeke's heart thudded, fearing that she was retreating from him into the shell she'd been in when they first met. But then she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "I love it here. It's different from what I know. Life on a ranch, it's not easy." Zeke's eyebrows furrowed. She did mention growing up on a ranch weeks ago when they rode for the first time. Before then, he hadn't heard anything about it from Augusta or Tiffany herself. There must have been a reason for that. He still had a lot of questions. It was okay to talk about it, wasn't it? "What was your father's ranch like?" "My father." Her eyes lost their sparkle and her lips pursed. "It was tough growing up." Her words trailed off. Zeke held his breath, waiting for more. No words followed. Did something happen on her father's ranch? Was that the reason for her withdrawal instead of the death of her previous husband, like he'd always thought? He wanted to know more, but it didn't look like she was ready to go deeper. Sensing the shift in her mood, he decided it was best to steer the conversation towards lighter topics. "Do you remember the last race we had?" "I do." Her smile returned, and she turned to face him. "Why? Every year there's a fair in town. The rodeo is a part of it. I was thinking of signing you up for the next horse race. You're probably the best rider I've seen in so long." Tiffany burst into laughter, placing a hand on her lips. "That's too much, Zeke." "It's not. I love seeing you ride. You straddle your horse with so much grace, and the horse seems to bond with you. It's a beautiful sight. I love it." "Thank you." She beamed at him, and his heart skipped a pulse. "You're not so bad yourself." They sat in companionable silence for a few moments, watching the waterfall on its endless journey downhill. Zeke's heart raced as he turned to face Tiffany, the words he'd rehearsed time and again teetering on the tip of his tongue. She faced him, raising a brow. "What's wrong?" He cleared his throat. "I've wanted to tell you something for a while now." Her eyes widened, but she nodded and leaned in. Zeke averted his gaze. He wanted to pour out his feelings and tell her of the love that had been simmering within him, but his chest tightened at the thought. What if she withdrew from him once more? The silence stretched between them, and nerves grew taut. Finally, with a deep breath that seemed to stretch on, Zeke found the courage to speak. His eyes met hers. He paused, the words catching like thorns in his throat. "I'm in love with you, Tiffany. I have been for a while now." The words hung in the air. Tiffany's breath hitched, her eyes searching his. "I did want to marry just so I could have someone to help me out, but I want more than that now," Zeke continued, the words pouring from his lips. "I want a real marriage and a real family with you. I want you as my wife. I want us to build a life together." The world stood still. A myriad of emotions flickered across Tiffany's face, her eyes remaining wide and her lips quivering, and then silence, tense and heavy. It wrapped around them like a thick fog. Zeke's heart thumped in his chest as he waited for an answer. None was forthcoming. Chapter 10. I want us to build a family together. The world tilted in Tiffany's eyes as Zeke's words rang in her mind. Her eyebrows crunched over her eyes, and she released a shuddering breath that escaped through her parted lips. The resolute stare in Zeke's eyes could only mean he meant every word. His eyes held a hope that was too heavy for her to bear. Why did he have to do this? She turned away, closing her eyes for a moment. A part of her wished it would all disappear when she opened her eyes. She would be sitting on the knoll with Zeke once more, her eyes fixed on the beauty of the waterfall and Zeke filling her thoughts. When she opened her eyes, he still stood there with the waterfall as a backdrop. His gaze remained on her. "Tiffany, She didn't know what to say. She searched for the words, but they wouldn't come. She didn't have an answer. Zeke was asking too much. Was he? Zeke had been good to her and her family. She enjoyed his company and looked forward to it. They'd grown much closer than before. She couldn't stop thinking of him. These days, she didn't even try to. He loved her. He wanted to be with her. She didn't know how to refuse him. She wanted to say the words, but they wouldn't come. All she could do was stare as the thoughts ran through her mind. Zeke reached out with a hand, but stopped, his hand returning to his side. Tiffany tried to swallow past the lump in her throat. Without a word, she turned away. Her legs grew a mind of their own, moving even faster with each step. She needed to escape. "Tiffany, wait!" Tiffany swung onto her horse, grasping the reins with trembling fingers. The animal, sensing her urgency, sprang forward at her slightest touch. As they galloped away, Zeke's voice echoed through the trees and shrubs as it chased after her. "Tiffany! Tiffany!" She pushed it away, focusing only on the thought of getting away. Everything else blurred, from the drumming of hooves against the earth to the cold winds blowing against her and tussling her hair. She'd forgotten her hat, but it didn't matter. She didn't bother turning. Tears fell from her eyes as she rode on, but she fought them back. The wind dried up any that escaped her eyelids. Why did she feel like she was making a mistake? Why did her heart hurt? She sniffed, her jaws clenching as the horse sprinted on. She'd developed feelings for Zeke. The undeniable feelings already ran deep, yet the thought of giving voice to them and accepting the possibility of a future together made her shudder. The ranch, which looked like a home, now felt like a cage closing in on her. Tiffany rode hard, the ranch drawing nearer with each stride. Yet with each passing moment, the chasm in her grew deeper. She was running away, even when Zeke hadn't given her a reason to. Soon, the clear path and the wooden fences in the distance came into view. Even though it was only noon, the sun had faded out of view, and clouds darkened the sky. A rumble in the distance threatened a downpour. Tiffany's mind was in turmoil when she finally reached the yard. At the stables, two ranch hands were conversing in lively tones. She recognized the burly one as the man who'd been tending to the horses earlier. Jumping down, she turned to him and managed a smile. "Howdy, ma'am." She nodded a greeting, her grip on the side rein loosening. She then handed the reins over to the man and trudged toward the ranch house, not minding that the two ranch hands had their eyes on her. Nothing mattered. Her mind was dazed, and each step was heavier than the last. From the distance, she could already spot a seated figure on the porch holding a smaller figure. It could only be Augusta and Petey. Sure enough, as she got closer, Augusta sat rocking Petey to sleep, whispering to the infant. She tilted her head to face Tiffany, smiling warmly. "You're back. Petey and I?" She stopped, her brows pulling together. "What's wrong, dear?" "Nothing." Tiffany sniffed, then forced a smile. "Is my son asleep?" "Like a log." Augusta kept her gaze on Tiffany, her eyes narrowing. "Did something happen between you and Zeke?" Tiffany's facade crumbled, tears breaking free from their restraints. Her hands traveled to her face in an attempt to wipe the tears. Augusta stood and ushered her inside, away from prying eyes. In the sanctuary of the ranch house, Augusta waited in silence as Tiffany gathered her thoughts. Tiffany blinked, trying to force back yet more tears gathering at the corner of her eyes. As much as she convinced herself that she couldn't be with Zeke, it stung her heart to think about it. "Zeke took me to the waterfall." She drew in a sharp breath, her voice breaking. "It's a beautiful place." "That's good, but that can't be why you're this way, can it?" "We talked. Zeke told me." The words remained stuck in her throat. Augusta laid the sleeping boy down and came closer to her, touching her shoulder and fixing her with a gentle stare. "Talk to me, dear. What did he say?" "He loves me and he wants to build a family with me." "Oh, dear." Augusta wrapped her arms around Tiffany's shoulders, enveloping her in a long, warm hug. "What did you tell him?" I didn't say anything." The words tumbled out of her shuddering lips. "I left him there and came back." Augusta sighed, her hands remaining around Tiffany for a little longer. Then she pulled away, her hands finding the younger woman's. "Is it because he's a rancher?" Augusta asked, her voice gentle. Tiffany nodded. It was all she could manage, as the words were like a knot in her throat. "It's your father, Landon. That's why you're holding back, isn't it?" Again, Tiffany nodded, tears streaming anew. Augusta had managed to coax the truth from her heart. She tried to shut the memories of her father out of her mind. "Do you remember how we first met, dear?" "I do. I was lost in Madison, and I didn't know where to go. I only knew it was where my mother was born and raised, so it was the only place I thought of when running from home. You saw me on a bench near the town hall and took me to a friend of yours who ran a boarding house. When you came to check on me the next day, Ben was with you." Augusta beamed. "I'm glad you still remember. It seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?" "Yes. You've come a long way since then. You built a family with my son, and even though he's no longer with us, you have found something beautiful once more. This is your chance to embrace it. Let go of the past, child. Seek happiness now, in the present." Augusta's advice was a balm to Tiffany's soul. Tiffany pondered the words, the image of Zeke caring for her on her mind. His words came back to her. "I love you." Did she reciprocate his feelings? She liked him a lot as a person, but loving him was another matter. Or was it? "You love him too, am I right?" Augusta's words resonated within Tiffany, awakening something deep inside she hadn't known she possessed. She found herself nodding. "Yes, I do." She loved Zeke, truly and deeply. Augusta was right. "What do you want to do about it?" "I'll build a family with him," Tiffany said, drying her tears with her hands. "Good." Augusta smiled and pointed to the door. "Then go to him and tell him you love him." And with that, Tiffany knew what she had to do. Her heart pounded with an erratic beat that made her draw deep breaths as she burst through the doors. She whispered a prayer, saying that Zeke should remain at the waterfall. There was no better place to tell him. Just as she got outside, Tiffany stopped. A cold wind blew against her skin. Her strides faltered, and her boots screeched against the gravel as her eyes locked onto the figure striding through the ranch gates. They shot wide, and she took a step back. Then another. A chill ran down her spine. It had been years, but she could still recognize that steely gaze from those gray eyes that were devoid of any warmth. It was the face that had haunted her thoughts, her father, whose presence sliced through the warmth building in her like a chill wind. Her breath hitched, a silent gasp clawing at her throat. Dark and tumultuous memories, which she'd taken care to bury, sprang forth from her mind's dark recess, and each one reminded her of past pains she thought she'd escaped. His gaze found hers across the distance, and his jaw dropped. Tiffany! She was about to take another step back, but stopped. This wasn't the rough, fierce-faced man whose weathered face had been the literal source of nightmares for her. He'd aged. Wrinkles dominated his face, and his brown hair had vanished, leaving behind a balding head with fading gray hair. His stride wasn't as purposeful anymore, and his steps were slow. There were signs of him advancing in age when she decided to leave, but it hadn't been this pronounced. It wasn't up to a decade, yet he seemed like a different person entirely. None of that mattered to Tiffany. An unanswered question that had risen months ago when she received his letter returned with an even greater voice, echoing in her thoughts. How did he find her? He approached her, his gait steady. Behind him was a tall, lanky ranch hand, one of Zeke's. He was smiling as he said a few words while nodding in Tiffany's direction. Then he ran off, leaving her alone with her father. She winced. "Tiffany," he began, his voice more coarse than she remembered. "I'm here." She kept from responding with a savage reply. She still didn't know how he found her. "I've missed you, my dear. It's been lonely on the ranch without Tabitha and you. I've spent the days gazing into the horizon and shooting birds. It's not the same without family." The mention of Tiffany's mother sent her skin heating, and she gritted her teeth to control herself. This man of all people knew nothing about family. "Why are you here? I've come for you and the boy. I didn't even know you had a boy." He chuckled, but it faded quickly. "My years are waning, and I don't want to be left alone in my final days." Tiffany's eyes narrowed. "How did you know I was here?" "All I had going for you was that you went to Madison, Georgia. It took me a lot of asking around, but I found out you were here through a letter from this place. I was surprised." "Why didn't you write to your old man?" It all made sense. Tiffany couldn't hold it in any longer. As the initial shock subsided, a burning inferno ignited within her. This was her life, her choice, and she would not be swayed by the man who had dictated her every move for far too long. "I left home for a reason, and no," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor that threatened to betray her. "I won't go back. Not now, not ever." Her father's brows knitted together, his smile fading. It gave her flashes of the man she knew. "You would defy me? For what?" He spread his arms, encompassing the whole scene. "This ranch? A rancher? He can't take care of you like I can, and you know it. I just want you home to be with me in my last days. I don't have very long. Can't you do this for me?" "I won't," Tiffany said, her fear hardening into a steely resolve. "I left your ranch. I'm never going back. Is this what you want? Would you want my grandchild to grow up without even knowing his grandfather?" Tiffany was having none of it. "Peter remains with me, and I'm staying here." Her father lapsed into silence, and the tension threatened to engulf them both. But Tiffany stood her ground, her eyes blazing. She was tired of giving in. Her father was her past. Zeke was her future. She couldn't wait to tell him that. Chapter 11. Zeke sat motionless, his gaze fixed on the relentless cascade of the waterfall. It roared on, oblivious to the world around it. Sighing, he picked up a smooth stone and threw it as hard as he could. The stone disappeared in the thunderous rush of water. His mind was in an even greater mess, and tumultuous thoughts churned within his head. He tried to focus on the scenery, but couldn't. Tiffany's departure had left a void, and somehow, the silence that followed was louder than the crashing water. His heart hurt as though it had been wrenched from his chest, leaving behind a hollow emptiness. Where did he get it wrong? Perhaps his dream of a family with Tiffany was too bold. He had laid bare his heart, only to watch her turn away. He couldn't do anything as her silhouette grew smaller until it vanished entirely. The rejection was clear. Zeke muttered under his breath, burying his face in his palms. He was a fool for thinking Tiffany would open up to him. From the first moment she stepped on his ranch, she had shut him out. Yet his feelings grew. Could he have done it any better? Groaning, he ran a hand through his hair. It didn't make any difference. Tiffany's rejection ruined whatever chance they had together. The rejection stung, a raw, aching pain that seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. He had been so sure, no, so hopeful. Even when doubt crept in, he shut out the dissenting voices and went for it. He loved her after all. But that was over. Zeke let go of his hair, releasing a long, shuddering breath. He had been a fool to believe in hope. Zeke's gaze moved to the sky above. The clouds were gathering. It would probably rain soon. He couldn't stay there for longer. However, he found he couldn't move. The heaviness of his body mirrored that of his spirit. He was anchored to the ground, the weight of his emotions numbing his limbs. He had no desire to move. It was clear. If he returned, he'd have to face Tiffany. Where would they go from there? He couldn't put himself through the tension anymore. Zeke shook his head. He had no choice. A spark of resolve within him flickered to life. He couldn't sit here forever, wallowing in what might have been. With a deep breath that did little to ease the tightness in his chest, Zeke pushed himself to his feet. His movements were stiff, and he staggered to his horse like a drunk man. In a way, he was. He soon reached his horse, his hand trembling as he took the reins. Even the familiar touch of the leather was numbed against his palms. The men would still be in the field. Perhaps he'd join them. If tending to his ranch didn't help take his mind off Tiffany, Zeke didn't know what else could. Life went on, despite the pain. Mounting his horse, Zeke took one last look at the waterfall. The vibrant beauty of the landscape was a stark contrast to the bleakness growing inside him. Then, with a gentle nudge, he urged his horse forward. He'd ridden through this path earlier with Tiffany by his side and with high hopes for the future. He was returning now with anguish, his hopes shattered. The path back to the ranch was a blur. As he rode, the resolve that had pushed him to his feet grew stronger. He would not let this defeat him. He would face whatever came next with the same strength that had seen him through every other trial. When the time came, he would handle questions about his future. He clenched the reins tight as he struggled to focus on getting back. He had to put a distance between himself and the moment that had changed everything. Zeke's return to the ranch was a quiet affair. He nudged his horse toward the stables. He would go out into the field later. As he jumped down from his horse, he caught some movement from the corner of his eye. A ranch hand was running up to him, his voice echoing in the wind. Zeke's brows wrinkled. "Davis? You're back, Mr. Stratton," Davis said when he reached him, panting. "A visitor is waiting for you. He says he's from Texas." Texas? Zeke scoured through his memory, but there was no familiarity. It was hard enough trying to focus anyway. "I see. Take care of my horse. He'll need a good rub down. I'll be back soon." Davis nodded, handling the reins and leading Zeke's horse into the building. With a heavy heart, Zeke made his way there. Each step was a labor. He wanted to sit on the rocky ground and forget everything, but there was work to be done. First, there was the mystery visitor to deal with. As he approached the ranch house, Zeke spotted Tiffany in the distance. He stopped, his nerves growing taut. He hadn't counted on seeing her so soon. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, then resumed his stride. When he'd gotten close enough, he noticed a graying, gaunt man beside her. Tiffany's hands clutched her dress, and there was a deep frown on her face. "Don't be stubborn like a heifer. This Zeke isn't your child's father. I'm his grandfather. I don't want to die without my grandson knowing who I am." "I'm sorry, father, but I can't." Zeke raised a brow. "Petey's grandfather? That meant... What's going on here?" Tiffany turned, her eyes softening when her eyes met Zeke's. They held each other's gaze for a moment, then she averted her gaze. The pit in Zeke's belly grew deeper. The man stepped forward. "You must be Zeke." "I am, sir." Zeke extended a hand. The man's steely gaze ran over him, and then he took the outstretched hand. "Landon," he said, nodding. "Tiffany's father." Zeke's gaze narrowed. "Why was Tiffany's father here?" "It's good to meet you. May I know why you're here?" Landon's next words were like a cold wind. "I've come to take my daughter home. I want her and my grandson by my side in my twilight years." Zeke's stare moved from Tiffany to Landon. His thoughts raced. He looked at Tiffany, searching for a sign of her wishes, but her face was an unreadable storm of emotions. Was this what she wanted? His head whirled, and he tried to make sense of Landon's words. He'd expected too much. He didn't know what to do since Tiffany had rejected his proposal, but her father's appearance spoke volumes. They just weren't meant to be. Zeke's shoulders dropped. "If it's what Tiffany wants..." But Tiffany cut him off, her voice firm. "No, Zeke, I don't want to go with him." Zeke, torn between his love for her and the sting of her earlier rejection, turned to face her. Why? Tiffany opened her lips to speak, but no words came. She remained silent and looked away. Tiffany, you're better off with him. He's family after all, and I'm not. There's nothing I can offer you. Her eyes met his, and the piercing stare she gave him sent a chill down his spine. This time, he was the one averting his gaze. Was that pain in her eyes? No. His fists clenched so tight they ached. This was for the best. She was better off with her real family. Chapter 12. You're better off with him. He's family after all. Tiffany's world crumbled as Zeke's words fell on her like ice. His voice was steady, yet it sounded like a distant echo. She gasped, and her mouth slackened. Her eyes met his, and he turned away. She stared openly as the world around her became a haze. Tiffany clutched her arms, and her heart churned as she gathered her thoughts. His words were clear. He didn't want to have anything to do with her anymore. She bit back a sob. It wasn't so long ago that she'd decided to tell him about her desire to be with him. That thought couldn't be further from her at that moment. I'm glad you were part of my life, Zeke continued, his eyes falling, but I can't keep you from your family. I don't want to. Is this what you want? Tiffany's voice was a fragile whisper, her chest throbbing under the weight of her heartache. Part of her hoped he'd change his mind. She held her breath, waiting for his answer. His eyes met her for a brief moment. Then he sighed. Yes. Tiffany drew back, tears clouding her gaze. With that single word, the last thread of hope within her frayed and broke. Her chest tightened and she struggled to breathe. She pressed her lips tight and faced her father, the man who represented everything she despised. When she managed to muster a semblance of composure, she cleared her throat. I'll go back to Texas with you. Her words were barely louder than a murmur. She clutched the edge of her dress as she spoke, trying to keep the edge out of her tone. Landon nodded curtly, his lips curling up slightly. Good, you should get ready. You can bring your... I'll leave with you, but not until this evening. I have things to take care of. You can wait that long, can't you? Landon frowned, then shrugged. I can. Evening then. I'll be in town, and I'll be back soon. Turning to Zeke, Landon stretched his hand. Tiffany watched on as the two men shook hands. Then her father ambled to the gate where a buggy was waiting. The buggy soon disappeared out of view, and Tiffany was alone with Zeke. She had to face the ruins of her dreams alone. She tensed, trying to ward off the shaking that emanated from within her core. Tiffany, I understand. He's my father after all. She turned her back to him just as the tears broke out of her eyes. I'll start packing my things. You don't have to worry. I'll be gone by evening. With that, she strode away. She pinched her lips tight to keep them from trembling. As she entered the house, a resolve settled over her. She wasn't about to go back to Texas, to the life she had so desperately escaped. The idea of returning to her father's control made her stomach churn. Never again. With trembling hands, Tiffany opened the door. Augusta and Petey were nowhere in sight. She headed for her room, closing the door behind her as soon as she was in. The sobs she had been holding back now came freely, rocking her body. She fell to her knees, her face in her arms. In one afternoon, any thoughts or hopes of a future she had envisioned with Zeke fell apart. But as the tears streamed through her cheeks, she made up her mind on one thing. She wasn't going back to Texas. An hour had passed. Fabric rustled and drawers closed as Tiffany folded what was left of her life into an old trunk. Outside, the sky rumbled. Gray clouds darkened the atmosphere, threatening to burst at any moment. It would probably rain any time after then. The pace of Tiffany's hands quickened, and her mind raced. She had to hurry. She paused as her hands brushed through the dress Zeke had gotten for her. With a heavy heart, she folded the piece of clothing and placed it on the bed. She did the same for any clothing that he got her. A knock on the door disrupted her thoughts. She straightened, tilting her head slightly behind. It's me, dear. Augusta. Please come in. Augusta entered, her brows knitting amid the chaos. She gave Tiffany a questioning stare. Why are you packing? Augusta's voice was calm, but her eyes moved around. What happened? Tiffany resumed packing. My father came earlier. He wants me to come back to Texas with him. Oh my! Augusta's eyes shot wide. and her hand moved to her parting lips. How did he find you? Our old address in Madison. He went to Madison? Tiffany nodded. Augusta sat on the edge of the bed, shaking her head. What happened? Surely you won't listen to what he says. You'll stay here, won't you? Tiffany paused, her hands stilling on the soft cotton of a dress. Something occurred to her. I have to go, she said, her voice breaking. Even Zeke thinks I'm better off with my father. Zeke? When? He walked in while me and my father were talking. But you don't believe that, do you? Augusta pressed, rising to her feet and stepping closer. Tiffany shook her head, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. She'd cried enough already. The only thing on her mind was leaving. It doesn't matter what I believe. Zeke has made up his mind. Did you tell him how you feel? Augusta's question came as a gentle nudge. Tiffany swallowed hard. There's no need. He's already let me go. Augusta sighed. Tiffany dropped her clothes and turned, holding the other woman's wrinkled hands in hers. She pleaded with her stare. Come with me, Augusta. Let's leave this ranch. We'll go to town, find a boarding house, and figure things out together. We don't need Zeke or my father. I'll find a way. We've survived before by ourselves, haven't we? No. Augusta pulled her hands away, placing them on her hips. Not this time, Tiffany. You need to stay. Talk to Zeke. Face your father. Don't run from this. Didn't you hear what I said? I can't stay here anymore. Tiffany threw her hands in the air. None of this is for us. Zeke doesn't want me here. We should go away before my father returns, or it'll be much harder to leave. You're running away, dear. You didn't even tell Zeke how you truly feel about him. He doesn't know. He loves you and wants a family with you. When he told you, your response was to flee. He probably thinks you wanted nothing to do with him. I see him deciding something like letting you go with Landon because he thinks that's your family. Did you tell him anything about your past? Augusta's resolute stare pierced Tiffany's thoughts. She brought a shaky palm to her forehead, inhaling deeply to steady her breathing. I don't have to tell Zeke anything anymore. My father will be here in a few hours, and I don't think Zeke would want to go back on his word. She turned away. I'm leaving. Augusta placed a hand on Tiffany's cheek. Look at me, dear. With a hard-worn look of resignation, Tiffany complied. Augusta's eyes held a warmness that eased the tension. Is this what you want? Do you want to leave all you've built with Zeke behind? Tiffany could only nod. The word she was looking for failed to leave her lips. Augusta backed away, exhaling deeply. Tiffany zipped up her trunk. She'd made her decision. Where's my son? Asleep in my room. I'll go bring him. Tiffany sat for the first time since she began packing as Augusta left the room. At once, the muscles in her legs began to throb. She'd been standing for so long. She glanced at the old leather trunk, and Augusta's question rang in her mind. Was leaving what she really wanted? She didn't have enough time to think about it as Augusta returned with a sleeping Petey. Tiffany stood. The time had come. With Petey secured in a sling against her chest, Tiffany took one last look at the room that had been hers for a few months. I'm leaving now. Please come with me. Augusta remained steadfast. I'm staying. I know you'll rethink and come back. Zeke is a good man. I just wish you'd see him as your husband and make peace with him. Tiffany's heart was set. It's too late, Augusta. Goodbye. I'll be waiting for you in town. With those words, she stepped out of Zeke's house. The memories of her time on the ranch flashed before her eyes, and she blinked away tears. She was leaving another ranch behind. Overhead, the clouds grew ominously dark, and the birds flew around in a frenzy. Cold winds blew against Tiffany's dress. She walked past the gate, leaving behind Zeke and his ranch. Chapter 13. The evening seemed to stretch on. The rain, which had threatened to unleash its fury all day long, finally pelted down like a relentless barrage. A chill came with it, draping over Zeke. He trudged through the sodden fields, each step squelching in the mud. His worn hat and coat were drenched already, but he didn't mind. He ambled through the fields, digging his hands into his pockets and drawing deep breaths. The scent of wet earth mingled with the sharp tang of rain all around, enveloping the air with a heavy, damp aroma. The ranch stretched out before him, each structure barely visible through the curtain of rain. He knew this path by heart, however, so he had no trouble finding his way. The wooden fences creaked under the weight of the downpour, and the horses in the distant stable whinnied on. Thunder crackled in the distance, adding to the commotion all around. Zeke's thoughts, however, were far from the storm raging around him. Instead, they lingered on Tiffany. Her image remained transfixed in his mind, and it didn't seem like that was changing soon. He clenched his fists as the day's events came back to him. The moment he poured out his heart to her, only to watch her flee, haunted his mind. Then there was Landon's stern figure. He murmured under his breath. He had no choice but to let her go. Landon was her father, after all. She didn't want to be with him. That meant there was no place for her on his ranch. Things would never return to normal, no matter what he did. It was for the best. She was better off with her father. At least she'd be happier. Had she left for good? The question gnawed at him, causing an ache in his chest. He stopped, frowning. Why was he feeling this way? Was he truly prepared to let her go? It didn't matter. With weary steps, Zeke resumed, dragging his feet through the rain-soaked landscape. He sighed, but the sound was lost amidst the storm's roar and the hammering of raindrops on his hat. He tried to push aside his thoughts and focus on the path ahead, but he couldn't. Through the veil of rain, the outline of his ranch house loomed in the distance. His chest caved in as it occurred to him that he'd returned to the times where he spent days and nights. With a resigned nod, Zeke squared his shoulders and pressed on. Zeke's gaze ran over the porch before he stepped in. He recalled the pain in Tiffany's eyes with great anguish. His head dropping, he pushed open the door to find Augusta sitting by the fireplace. She paused her knitting, her eyes nearly bulging at the sight of him. "You're soaking wet, dear. Couldn't you wait out the rain in your barn or someplace nearby?" Zeke took off his hat and coat, folding the dripping clothing and placing them on a rack near the door. He sauntered to a worn leather settee, slumping onto it and releasing a loud, deep breath. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. "I didn't see any need to wait out the storm. It could rage on all night. I wonder how Tiffany and Landon will set out in this weather." He ran his palms through his wet hair, then glanced around. "Tiffany isn't with you. Is she still here?" The old woman shook her head, her eyes reflecting the flame's flicker. "She's gone, Zeke. She took Petey and left." Zeke's heart sank. He leaned back, lifting his gaze upward and fixing his eyes on the rough-hewn ceiling above. The weathered wooden beams stretched in a neat pattern, and he still remembered when he'd fixed the roofing after a bad storm a year ago. He'd been alone then. He was alone now. The flickering light of the oil lamp cast dancing shadows across the timber, adding a subtle warmth to the otherwise dim room. As he stared openly at the ceiling, his mind drifted and his eyes closed. Then they shot open. "Why didn't you follow her?" He 10%. "I didn't agree with her leaving." She smiled, although it didn't reach her eyes. "I believe she'll come back. She'll realize she's making a bad decision and be back." Strangely enough, a part of him wished so as well. "I understand. Thank you, ma'am. Maybe I'm not fully alone after all." He flashed her a warm smile. "I promise I'll take care of you. It's been so long since I had a mother figure in my life. My mother died when I was still little." "I'm so sorry to hear that. Thank you." He paused for a brief while. "When did Landon come for them?" Augusta shook her head. "Landon never came back. Tiffany decided to leave for town on her own." Zeke sat up, his brows raised. A jolt shot through him, his heart pounding with sudden urgency. Why would she run? Isn't she going back to Texas with her father? Augusta heaved a sigh, dropping her knitting materials on her lap. Her lips pressed into a thin line. With a distant stare and a somber voice, she began speaking. "Tiffany never wanted to come to your ranch because of the childhood she had. From what she told me, she grew up on a ranch much bigger than this. Landon was one of the wealthiest ranchers in town, but he valued his ranch over his flesh and blood. He was a hard man. He never had sons, and Tiffany was his only daughter. It didn't matter to him. He was the kind of man who would spend most of his time in the fields. He handled rowdy cowboys on a large ranch, so he wasn't very patient and friendly. It didn't help that he had a fierce temper." Zeke's fists clenched at his sides. When Tiffany had told him she had a hard time growing up, he hadn't understood her. He did now. He remembered how he'd insisted she leave with her father even when she refused, and it made his heart sink. The only care Tiffany knew was from her mother, Augusta continued. She arrived years after her parents had been married, and her mother doted on her. But that didn't last long, because her mother was in ill health. When her mother died, Landon became even worse. After a few years of maltreatment, she decided to take matters into her own hands and run. That was when she came to Madison, where her mother was born. She never spoke to her father until today. I didn't know. Zeke's voice broke, and he covered his face with his hands. I told her to leave with the man who'd made her go through so much. You didn't know any better. Don't blame yourself, Zeke. You only did what you thought was best for her. She told me what you told her at the waterfall. She did? Zeke asked without looking up. Yes. It's such a shame she didn't tell you how she felt as well, even though she wanted to. Zeke frowned. What do you mean? Augusta's voice was steady. She wanted to build a family with you as well, dear, even though she was so unsure. She held back because of her past and her hatred for ranchers. Despite all that, she still wanted to be with you. The words struck Zeke like a bolt of lightning. The truth of what he had done dawned on him, and he pulled at his hair. His brows creasing together, he winced. I've made a terrible mistake. His voice was barely audible. Augusta reached out and touched him, her hand warm against his arm. She beamed, and her smile calmed his racing heart. Then go make it right. If you love her, go find her. I don't know where she is, but all I know is she'll be staying in a boarding house. Zeke nodded, jumping to his feet. His posture straightened, and his gaze lit up. He would find Tiffany, explain, and make things right. No matter what it took, he would not let her slip away from him. Not now, not ever. I'll be back soon with Tiffany and your grandson, I promise. The rain is still coming down hard. Are you sure you can't wait until later? Grabbing his hat, he turned and nodded. I'll be okay. Not bothering to wait for a response, Zeke stepped out. The storm hammered on, turning the world into a blur of gray. He stepped out into the storm, fueled by a desire that burned under his skin even as the rain soaked him to the bone. He was on his way to the stables when he spotted a buggy pulling up outside the fence. A figure emerged from the rain and strode to the porch. Through the glow of a lantern inside, Zeke made out the familiar features of Zeke's father. Landon, Zeke acknowledged, his voice steady despite the cold that seeped into his skin. I need to see my daughter, Landon said, his voice loud and his eyes scanning the ranch as if he could will Tiffany's presence into being. It's evening, as agreed. Couldn't you have waited out the storm? We'll wait it out in town. I want to spend as much time as I can with Tiffany. She's not here, Zeke said, his words cutting through the downpour. She's gone. What? Landon roared. You let her leave? He stepped closer to Zeke, fixing him a cold stare. Zeke met Landon's gaze without budging an inch. He wasn't about to be intimidated. No. Then why isn't she here? Landon pointed a finger at Zeke. You're trying to keep me from my daughter, but I won't have it. Tell me where my daughter is, Zeke, or I'll... Wherever she is, she's not on this ranch anymore. And it's your fault. You made her suffer as a child, and now you want her back with you on your ranch? That ain't happening. Zeke stepped closer. I'm going to find Tiffany, and she's not going anywhere because she's my wife, and Petey is my son now. My wife and son are precious to me, and I'll protect them, even if it's from you. Landon jerked back, his eyes bulging and his features slackening. But Zeke wasn't finished. I made a mistake, and it's one I won't make again, he said, his voice rising above the storm. I nearly let you have my wife. You've had your chance. You could have taken care of your daughter, but you chose your ranch. I don't know if you'll ever realize the wrong in your ways, but I'm not letting Tiffany go. Landon's posture deflated, and his shoulders dropped. Why do you think I'm here? Zeke raised a brow, but answered anyway. You need someone to take over your ranch, and Tiffany and Zeke are your only family left. No, he sighed, settling on the bench nearby. They're indeed my only family left, but that's not why I want her back. After she left, I realized what I'd been doing wrong. I ruined my family while thinking I was building it. I wanted to make amends. I'll sell my ranch when I get back. I can't handle it anymore. I just hope things turn around. But I wanted to at least try to show Tiffany and my grandson the love I didn't give her when she was a child. Zeke's lips pursed, his anger subsiding. All things considered, Landon was still Tiffany's father. You can tell her you're sorry, but I can't let her leave with you. It's okay. She loves you, and I see you love her as well. Find her, he said in a shaky voice. Give her the life I couldn't. I will. Without another word, Zeke turned and ran to the stables. He prepared his horse, whispering to the restless animal that neighed loudly. Before long, he'd saddled the stallion and was already mounted. After a final glance back at the ranch house, he lashed at the reins and rode off into the rain. The horse's hooves dug into the muddy soil before reaching the hard trail. Zeke spurred his horse on with great urgency. This time, his mind was set. He would bring Tiffany back home, no matter what. Chapter 14. The clouds gathered in the sky, and the late afternoon already seemed like twilight. Chilly winds blew the dust off the streets as Tiffany trudged along the road in town, exhausted by the weight of her sleeping son. She glanced around, hoping to find a place to stay soon. Soon, there would be a storm. She had to find somewhere. All the while, Augusta's plea still echoed in her mind. She clutched the leather handle of her trunk tightly, wondering if she wasn't being hasty. She shook her head. Anything was better than facing her father again. Her steps faltered as she caught sight of a carriage approaching in the distance. The coachman pulled the reins, and the horses came to a stop. As the carriage stopped by, she took a step back, her brows furrowed. If it was her father, the curtain shifted to reveal a familiar face. "Tiffany, it's you!" Tiffany's tense muscles relaxed, and a smile curled her lips. It was only Riva, the woman she'd met in the store. They'd met a few times since then, and Tiffany saw her as a friend. "How are you?" "I'm quite okay." Riva's face lit up. "Please come in. I'm headed to the store, but I can drop you off wherever you want. It looks like it'll rain soon, and I don't want you stuck." Tiffany hesitated for a moment, then climbed into the carriage beside Riva, hoping Petey would stay asleep. She mumbled her thanks, and Riva waved it off. As they rumbled along the dirt road, Riva turned to her with a wide smile. "Is that your son? He's such a beautiful boy." "Thank you very much." Tiffany noticed the bump in Riva's belly had disappeared. "Have you—" "A month ago. A girl." Riva burst into laughter. "Joel was so excited. You'd think he was the one who gave birth." Tiffany tried to laugh but could manage only a smile. "What's wrong? You don't seem yourself, Tiff." Riva's grin faded, her gaze moving to Tiffany's trunk. "And why do you have a trunk with you? Are you traveling?" "No," Tiffany exhaled. "I left Zeke's ranch." Riva's eyes widened and her fingers traveled to her lips. "Oh no, what happened? Why'd you leave? You were happy out there on the ranch with Zeke? Did something happen?" Tiffany struggled to keep from breaking into tears. She swallowed hard, the lump in her throat threatening to choke her breath. "Zeke confessed his love for me." "That's beautiful. What happened then?" "I didn't know what to do, so I ran. I hurt him," Tiffany said, clutching the edges of her dress. "Later, my father came. He's in town and he wants me to come home with him. Zeke suggested I go with my father since my place isn't on his ranch." "I'm sorry. I don't understand. Where does your father come into this?" Tiffany took a deep breath, then recounted the painful memories of her childhood, including the years of neglect at the hands of a father who had never been there for her. Tears welled in her eyes as she recounted the moment when Zeke had agreed to let her go and the ache it caused her. "I had to leave. I can't go back with my father, even if it means leaving Zeke." Riva reached out and held Tiffany's shivering hand, her touch warm and reassuring. "I'm so sorry, Tiffany. You don't deserve any of this." "It's all right, Riva. Right now, I just need a place to stay. I've been looking for one in town." Riva fell silent for a while, then smiled. "I know a place. You'll be fine there. I'll pay the expenses, so you don't have to worry." "Oh, no, you don't have to," Tiffany said, shaking her head. "I can afford a few days by myself. I'll find something to do within that time." "Please, I want to. It's the only way I can help. I'd do more if I could, but I don't think I can do anything else. At least, let me do this much." Tiffany's heart swelled, and a few tears trickled down her face. "Thank you so much, Riva." A few minutes later, they came to a stop at a tall, gingerbread trimmed building with a wooden facade that had a wide veranda adorned with rocking chairs. A sign above the entrance swinging in the wind read McCready's house. Tiffany's nerves threatened to overwhelm her. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The two women stepped into a quaint living room with worn but comfortable furniture arranged around a fireplace, although there was no fire. From somewhere in the house, lively chatter echoed through the walls. Tiffany's nose caught a faint aroma, and her belly rumbled. She hadn't eaten all day. Food could always come later. "The owner of this place is the aunt of a friend. She's a kind woman. I'll be right back." Tiffany nodded, and Riva disappeared into an adjoining hallway. She tried to distract herself from her tumultuous thoughts by taking in her surroundings. Minutes passed, and she waited. She was about to take a seat in one of the chairs when Riva emerged with the proprietress, a kind old woman with a warm smile. The smile sent warmth flickering into her chest. "Pleased to meet you, dear. I'm Evelyn McCready. I'm glad you'll be staying with us. You'll surely have a pleasant stay." Tiffany offered her a grateful smile, but she didn't say a word. Riva whispered to the gray-haired woman, then turned to Tiffany. "I have to go now. Joel would probably be wondering where I am. I'll surely come to see you soon." Riva held Tiffany's hands. "Take care of yourself and your son. Please, you'll be all right." "I will. God bless you for everything you've done." Riva bid her goodbye and left, and Tiffany faced Evelyn, who was already at the stairs, beckoning to her. She followed the old woman to her room, a sizable one near the attic. "Dinner will be ready in an hour. Try to get settled. There's water for a wash if you want." "Thank you, ma'am." Smiling, Evelyn left. Tiffany placed Petey gently on the bed, fighting back tears as she resolved to be strong for both herself and her child. With a deep breath, Tiffany wiped away her tears and squared her shoulders. Her life with Zeke was behind her, yet why couldn't she stop thinking of him? The steady drumming of rain against the windowpane drowned out everything else but Tiffany's racing thoughts. She sat alone in her room, picking at her dinner. She was hungry, yet without any appetite. How could she, after the day she'd had? "I love you. I want to build a family with you." Her heart fluttered, and the rich vegetable meal turned to sawdust in her mouth. She swallowed past the lump in her throat. Her hands paused on her spoon. She missed Zeke. Her mind traveled to the ranch. What would Zeke and Augusta be doing now? It was a cold, rainy eve, so they'd probably be sitting around the fire after a hot meal. If only things hadn't gone the way. Tiffany. Amid the pitter-patter of rain, a sound disrupted her thoughts. Was she hearing things? No. It was a faint voice calling her name. At first, she dismissed it, but the persistent sound drew her attention. Straining her ears, she realized the voice was familiar, tugging at her heart. Before she could make sense of it, the door creaked open, and the proprietress bustled into the room. Her face creased. "Tiffany, dear, there's a man outside calling for you," she said, her voice barely audible over the roar of the rain. A man? Heart pounding, Tiffany rushed past Evelyn and other people heading up and down the stairs. When she reached the porch, which was lit by an oil lamp, she squinted to see through the downpour until she caught sight of a figure standing in the distance near her window. As the figure drew closer, her breath caught in her throat and tears welled in her eyes. It was Zeke. Without hesitation, she ran toward him, her feet splashing through puddles as she closed the distance between them. And then they were in each other's arms, the rain pouring down around them. Tiffany didn't know what came over her. Regaining her senses, she pulled away. "I'm sorry." Zeke touched her face, his eyes fixed on hers. She held her breath. He shook his head. "No, I'm sorry, Tiffany." Zeke's voice was raw with emotion. "Augusta told me all about Landon, and what you wanted to tell me. I didn't know. You thought I rejected you? I did. I can't believe I was about to let you go." His jaw clenched, and he pulled her into a tight embrace. "I'll never let you go again. I promise. I'll take care of you, no matter what." Tiffany could hardly believe what she was hearing. This time, she willingly gave in to a desire to be closer to Zeke. She clung to him, her heart overflowing. "Please come back, Tiffany. I love you. I want to be with you." She leaned against him, reveling in the moment. "Let's grow our family together." Tears streamed down Tiffany's cheeks as she nodded, her heart jumping at the words. Yes, she whispered, her voice lost in the drumming of the rain. I will. I love you, Zeke. In that moment, as they stood together in the embrace of the storm, Tiffany was at peace. Everything would be all right. Epilogue. The train's whistle blared at an almost deafening tempo, drowning out every other sound. It was almost time for departure. Zeke stared around the platform, and the corners of his lips pulled up. The last time he'd been here was to receive Tiffany and Augusta. Now it was time to say goodbye to a family member. His gaze moved to the woman by his side, who was clad in a simple gray dress and who had packed her golden hair into a braided nun. He then faced the balding, gaunt man standing in front of them. He and Tiffany had come to say goodbye to her father. Her body tensed, and he could sense it through her tightening grip on his hand and the rapid blinking of her eyes. She didn't want to come at first, but he convinced her to. He squeezed her hand and offered her a warm smile as she turned to him. She returned the smile. It's almost time for me to leave, Landon said. Zeke nodded. Tiffany's eyes moved away, but she didn't utter a word. So long, Landon. Landon clutched his hat in his weathered hands, stopping to face Tiffany. I know it's hard to forgive all I've done. When I met your mother, I was a struggling ranch hand. I loved her so much that I worked hard to give her a better life. Before long, I had my ranch. I could finally wed her, and we did. It was the best day of my life. He coughed, and his body shook. Clearing his throat, he continued. I wanted so much for us. I wanted a family. But years passed, and we went without a child. Since I loved your mother, I didn't want to leave her. Instead, I focused on my ranch. I became wealthy, but it wasn't enough to fill that hole. Then you arrived after 10 years of waiting. Zeke glanced at Tiffany, whose eyes glistened with tears. He smiled. This was what they both needed. You were everything to me. Yet even at that, I don't know what happened. Something changed in me over the years. I became unkind and rough. When she died and you left a few years later, I was at my lowest. I got word that you married a newspaperman from Madison, and I decided leaving you alone would be best. But when he died, I just knew I had to come get you. It was the only way I could atone for my sins. Now, I didn't tell you all this so you could pity me or anything. I just want you to be happy now. I also want to say I'm sorry for being such a bad father. Tiffany wiped her tears. I can't just forget everything, but I do forgive you. Ma always taught me the value of forgiveness, and I want to live by that. Zeke watched on, noticing the struggle in Landon's eyes. Accepting his error was a good start. It's more than I deserve, Landon said, but I thank you, Tiffany. I truly do. They stood there, not moving, until Tiffany stepped forward. She wrapped her arms around her father. Landon hesitated before hugging her. The embrace didn't last long, but it was a beautiful sight. The train screeched in the distance and the engine roared to life. Take care of her, Landon said, his gaze shifting to Zeke. And that boy of yours. Keep being a good man. Don't let anything take you away from your family. Zeke nodded. I'll care for my family. Thank you. Landon looked at Tiffany, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Be happy, my girl. You and Zeke have my blessing. With those final words, Landon turned and boarded the train. Moments later, it began moving. Tiffany leaned back against Zeke. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as the train pulled away, its whistle soon a fading cry. They stood together in silence, watching as the train became a speck on the horizon. Tiffany's hand found Zeke's, their fingers intertwining. He squeezed her hand, his heart full. Let's go home. Together, they got off the emptying platform. Their wagon was visible in the distance, but Tiffany stopped. Zeke halted beside her, his brow furrowing. His eyes searched her face for clues, and the lines on his forehead deepened when he noticed she was staring into the horizon. What is it? He asked, his voice tinged with concern. Tiffany turned to him, her eyes gleaming. Thank you, Zeke, for everything. Zeke's confusion melted away, replaced by a warmth that spread through his chest and settled around his heart. His lips curled in a warm smile. I should be the one thanking you. Without you, I'd still be a lonely, overwhelmed rancher. Oh, Zeke? Zeke leaned in, his eyes slowly shutting. Her chin lifted to meet his, and their lips met in a tender kiss. His heart hammered against his chest even when he'd pulled back. Her eyes never wavered from his. They resumed their walk, hand in hand, reaching the wagon. As the horses started their steady pull back to town, Zeke turned to Tiffany with a glint in his eye. "Do you remember the picnic you suggested we all have at the waterfall?" Her smile was as bright as the sun that rode high in the sky. "I do. Why?" "I was thinking, we could have it today if you're ready. I spoke to Augusta already," she chuckled. "I couldn't be more ready." Zeke grinned. "Perfect." And it was perfect. All of it. The end.